So remember when I said I wanted to do more stuff like that? Well, here you go. Hello everybody, and welcome to the first episode of a little series that I wanted to start called My Journey Through. Yeah, I couldn't think of anything better. And the whole point of this series is for me to go through my insanely long watch and read list. Now, for the longest time, I've had this list slowly grow over the years, movies, shows, and in the case of today's videos, books, mangas, comics, so on and so forth. This is more or less a hyper glorified way of me actually getting through this. And as the title of this episode implies, I have decided to go all in on checking out the series My Hero Academia. For two reasons. Number one, it's a series that I have been egging myself to check out for a while, so much so that even some friends, specifically Epic King, who's probably the most vocal advocate when it comes to me actually checking this series out. And number two, the fact that the final season of the anime is coming out. Okay, so as I'm recording this, I just received news that the second season of the spin-off prequel series, My Hero Academia Vigilantes, will also be coming out sometime in January of 2026. So literally just got this news as I'm editing the video. Fantastic. So, having read the entire manga, I could easily spoil it. And that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Let's go! This is just going to be my general thoughts of the series and talk about some other things that I did in regards to this manga, pretty much. So in this video, I'm not gonna talk about the series word for word. I'm mainly gonna be talking about the key events that happen in it, and if certain details need to be stated, I'll be sure to state them. So join me as I recite my journey through My Hero Academia. Wow, that was super lame. God. Okay, so I do want to point out that just after I finished reading the manga, Disney put out a promotion for a Marvel My Hero Academia crossover one-shot, I think. They know. So let's set this up. Around 120 some years before the main events of this manga, a supernatural phenomenon started to take over the world, where people started suddenly exhibiting extraordinary abilities. And throughout the years, these abilities have garnered many names, one of them being meta abilities, but eventually the powers would be known as quirks. And with the rise of quirks, things tend to happen when people are given power. You have the rise of villain factions, but then with villain factions, you also have the rise of superheroes. Which brings us to the modern day, where we meet up with our main character, Izuku Midoriya, or as we're gonna call him, Deku. Man, it feels so irrelevant to just talk about this because so many people already talked about this series. But anyways, so Midoriya wants to become a superhero. Here's the problem though, in a society with a job where it's required of you to have a superpower, Midoriya does not. He does not possess a quirk. He is dubbed quirkless. It is here in the first chapter where we're introduced to Bakugo, Deku's bully. And don't worry, we're going to talk more about him later on, but anyways, Bakugo with his quirk, which is like a nitroglycerin sweat, we'll talk more about that later too, proceeds to torch Deku's notepad and toss it into this concrete pond. Hey, wait a minute, I swear I've seen this before. So I totally forgot this character was introduced early on. Ooh boy. But it is when he has a fateful meeting with his all-time favorite superhero and one of the greatest superheroes of the modern time, All Might, where he's finally given a chance to become a superhero. Oh yeah, I should probably also mention, All Might received a catastrophic injury from the villain All For One. We'll talk more about him in a bit. Because of that, he averts into this skinny old man form. So yeah, basically the number one hero is on a bit of a timer, which honestly is, I don't know how I feel too much about that, because as a superhero trope, it's unique, mainly because whenever we are presented with the Superman archetype hero, he's usually the untouchable. But on the other hand, this also kind of falls into, the sensei, the teacher trope that we do see a lot in other series. For me personally, it just kind of gives me a clear path as to what's going to happen to All Might later on, which ends up being surprising because what I end up predicting does not happen. We'll talk about that in a bit.
Now, ultimately, at first, All Might gives Deku a harsh reality check, stating that because he's quirkless, he couldn't become a hero, but when Deku shows the feat of selfless heroism to try and save Bakugo, get wrecked, scrub, that All Might himself couldn't even ignore, then proceeds to take Deku under his wing.
And yeah, that's pretty much the first chapter of My Hero. Wow, that was easy. After everything I said, that was like in the first chapter. So yeah, I'm gonna like skip over a lot of the school stuff in this series, which is I was really setting up myself for failure with that one, considering the series is called My Hero Academia. So what happens in the My Hero series exactly? Well, so after Deku learns that he could be a hero himself, All Might takes him under his wing and starts to train Deku. And by training, I mean just doing exercises, like building his body up, because he states that if Deku were to take his power in the physique that he's in currently, he'll explode. Anyways, All Might trains Deku through his own regiment, and also to clean out this beach, which, good job. Clean the environment, people. And after a year of training, Deku finally manages to achieve this physique that can support One For All. So, how does one gain One For All? By ingesting the DNA of the guy. This is going to be weird because it's implied that One For All is a power that's passed down, right? And what we're going to find out later is that there's a guy who's bald. And All Might gives Deku his DNA through, like, plucking his hair. But one of the past users is bald. How did he manage to transfer his DNA outside of hair? Because there's so many disturbing ways they could go about that. Oh no. So anyway, Deku eats the hair. After Deku manages to get power from All Might, which is all for one. No, sorry. One for all. Yeah, expect me to make like mistakes like that throughout the video. He attends UA, which is the most prestigious superhero academy in the entire country of Japan. Potentially the world. Again, I'm gonna need to recheck my notes. Anyways, yeah, in spite of what everyone else says, mainly Bakugo, who's like, you're quirkless. How you even? Also, like, spouting death threats like, hey, yeah. But that doesn't matter because a year later, Deku ends up getting into UA. Now, he did get in through the provisional means, like he was really good in the written tests and whatnot, but when it comes to the quirk department, which is kind of the thing that makes or breaks you when getting into UA, that's what he was lacking. But he's ready! Or so we think. This is where we're introducing other characters, mainly Uraraka. Also, there's so many characters in this series, it's hard to keep it cap. So, you know, some of them I'm just going to describe them by their quirks. Others I'm going to refer to by name because I can actually remember their names. And for others, I'm probably going to refer to them as their hero names, simply because it's easier for me that way. So the first arc of My Hero Academia is the entrance exam arc. So yeah, the students take the tests, and Deku actually manages to get in spite of the fact that he didn't really do too well in this test. Basically, the test is they have to defeat these robot minions, and by defeating certain robots, you gain a certain number of points. However, what the teachers at the facility did not mention is that there's two ways you can gain points. One of them is through eliminating these robot enemies that they set up, or they could get rescue points. And that's simply, you know, usually through helping out your fellow students if they're in trouble. And Deku managed to make more than enough points to get in because one of the big robots, which is worth 0 points, approaching Uraraka, who was trapped, you know, he just leapt into action and smashed the robot with his new power. However, this is where we, the viewer, kind of see something that's a bit off about All For One. Because when we see All Might use it, he's fine. You know, he could punch through walls, he could leap over a building, he could fly, so on and so forth. When Deku uses it, for some reason, his arms and legs turn into jelly. And I don't mean like literal jelly, I mean every bone in his arms and legs are just... And the reason for that is simply being Deku's body, like, yeah, it can contain All For One, but it cannot survive All For One? No, sorry, One For All. Damn. Basically with All Might, he had years of training, and it should be noted that by this point, All Might is around 50 years old. So he has more than enough time knowing about this quirk and honing it in. And we're going to learn something about All Might pretty soon. Just hold on. So yeah, with this in mind, Deku manages to pass that initial exam. And I will say, there is something really heartwarming about seeing Midoriya's mom like congratulating her son. I don't know, it's moments like those that really make me go, damn. But yeah, Midoriya's mom is like this adorable little thing, just this precious little Cinnabon. And yeah, I can't help but, like just root for them when she like roots on Midoriya. It's like, yeah, it's super cute. I love it. So, what happens after that initial exam? Well, Deku recovers thanks to the school nurse, who has a pretty useful quirk that allows her to heal people through kissing, I guess. Basically, her quirk like enhances the body that she kisses to recover. However, the one drawback being that the body needs to have sufficient amount of stamina. Otherwise, if it eats away at your stamina, you could potentially pass away through the recovery process. Next, we have the quirk apprehension test arc. So yeah, we got through that first test to really figure out what everyone's quirks are. We're introduced to the teacher, so what else is My Hero Academia going to provide? Another test. Okay. So yeah, when Aizawa like comes in, he's like, if you don't pass this, when he's gonna get expelled. But then miraculously, he says he was joking. And then it turns out he wasn't joking. Like, apparently in the past, he's been an absolute nuisance when it comes to being a teacher. And that's proven that the class before him, before 1A currently, he almost expelled every student from a single class. Pretty much. You know, it's like, you're all gonna get expelled. No, I'm just joking. I'm so surprised he didn't expel anybody. And then we have the battle trial arc, which basically pits teams of 2 students against another team of 2 students. One team represents the villains, while the other team represents the heroes. And in one of the matchups, we have Ida and Bakugo go against Ochako and Midoriya. And this is where, like, the cracks start to form for Bakugo, because at the beginning of the series, Bakugo is so much of a hothead. He thinks he's hot shit, thinks that he's basically untouchable because he has a powerful quirk. I say powerful because it's like, yeah, nitroglycerin, he manages to pull off some pretty good feats. Anyways, what happens in this arc is simple. Midoriya wins against Bakugo, and Bakugo's pride gets a little hurt. Next, we have the USJ arc, which is a pretty prevalent arc because this is where we meet up with the series' main antagonist, the main villain of this entire series. So we think. Okay, I say that. You'll see what I mean in a bit. So yeah, as the students are trying to do this exercise, this is where we're introduced to the main villain, Shigaraki. And their goal, appearing while the students are trying to do this exercise, is to kill All Might. But the weird thing is that he shows up in this very specific place. Basically, he shouldn't have known to be there, and yet he is there. And, you know, later on it would be discussed that there's a mole within UA. Now, All Might didn't show up because he wasn't feeling well. Remember what I said about All Might not being able to be, like, in peak form continuously? Yeah, that's the reason. All Might can only keep his muscle form for about 5 to 3 hours. Which is killer, since most school days are, like, around 9 hours. And this is a Japanese school, which I have no idea how long those last. Anyways, Shigaraki appears in hopes of killing All Might. And he brings out this big old thing called a Nomu. We'll talk more about the Nomu, specifically their origins, but not here, but yeah, we'll get there. So yeah, Shigaraki does some shenanigans, has this little army just kind of tormenting the kids, but then it's revealed to Shigaraki that the kids aren't exactly pushovers. You have Todoroki, who's absolutely wiping the floor with everybody. You know, Todoroki, the real main character of this series. So yeah, as Shigaraki is like doing his shenanigans, All Might appears, and you know, everyone knowing that Shigaraki's main goal is to kill All Might, it's like, hey, All Might's here! But Deku's here is like, ugh. Because Deku knows about All Might's secret. He knows that he can't keep this form for too long, and you know, the fact that he's even resting to begin with means that he reached a capacity with this form. So the fact that he's here is like sending alarm bells, like red flags everywhere for Midoriya. Meanwhile, everyone else is like, "Hey, All Might, let's kick some ass!" To say that this fight takes it out of All Might, ooh boy. Because yes, while at the end of the day, All Might manages to push the villains back
with the help of the other heroes,
punched Nomu so many times and so hard that he goes flying out of the arena.
With some assist from the students.
And surprisingly enough, and luckily enough, there were no casualties. The fight itself really took its toll on All Might. Remember how he said he could only keep that form for like 5 to 3 hours? Well, now that's been reduced significantly more to just 1 hour. And Midoriya, hearing about this, is very concerned about the future of not only All Might, but also the future of the Symbol of Peace, more or less. Because while All Might is indicative of the Symbol of Peace, the Symbol of Peace is also kind of the status quo. You know, just having society being maintained and not going into complete anarchy. Because as the series kind of continues, we learn that the world as it is presently in My Hero Academia wasn't always like that. Because yeah, apparently giant humanoids going at it isn't always seen as a spectacle as we see it in the first chapter. It was way darker. But we'll talk about that when we get there. Anyways, knowing about this really lights a fire under Midoriya's butt, pretty much. Now being the successor of All Might, he needs to work as hard, if not harder, to kind of catch up to him before All Might kind of, you know, basically before All Might kind of like caps out, pretty much. And then we have the UA Sports Festival arc, which brings us to the tournament arc. Yeah. Okay, so this arc is a lot different from what I saw. So I should probably mention that I did watch the My Hero Academia anime when it was releasing. I watched up until season 3, I believe. At some point, I just like stopped watching it, not through loss of interest, but mainly because I learned that the manga was out there. It's like, oh, I could be way more ahead than the show. So I decided to commit to that. So the tournament arc back then was actually pretty hype, but now rereading it and getting like a little better context of it. Okay, so two things to like note about this. So apparently this tournament is so big that it overthrew the Olympics. Okay. Like I find it just so funny how this one school can overthrow the Olympics. And that's the thing. This tournament isn't a national or international tournament. We're not getting students from all across the country or all across the world in other hero academies coming into UA to participate in this competition. It is solely the students of UA doing this competition. Okay, so this kind of goes into a problem that I have with My Hero Academia, where the world that Horikoshi is presenting is really good. It's fun, it's colorful, all that. But what he manages to try and get away with, it's like teaspoon deep. And this isn't through the design of the world itself. It is creative decisions done by the author himself. Because this could have been such a perfect opportunity to grow beyond the borders of UA High School. We could learn about other high schools. We could even learn about other heroes who attend those high schools, teaching the next generation of heroes. And, you know, just comparing and contrasting of different methods of learning. And, you know, it's like the first thing that comes to mind is like my own experiences doing like Skills Canada for the animation competitions. And, you know, it's like we came close to nationals, but every step of the way we go against like kids in different like districts, and then we go against kids in different towns and cities, and we only made it to the provisional one, which is like going up against the best students, the best teams within the province of Ontario. You know, it's like that was kind of an exciting thing to experience. I don't get that with this tournament in My Hero Academia, because again, we are only confined to the school of UA. And sure, we are going to get to a point where we will see other schools and other students, but in terms of what we could have had versus what we ended up having, I can't help but imagine how much better it would have been if that arc, the provisional license arc, I believe, and this tournament arc were just the same arc. You know, I just think that would have been way better, honestly. So yeah, the tournament arc goes as follows, and we learn more about Todoroki. Now, Todoroki is messed up, to say the least. Why is he messed up? Well, he is the son of the number 2 hero of the country, I believe. This goes to what I said before. It feels like there's so much more to this world, but we only see like a teaspoon level of it. And yeah, it's like, is All Might the greatest hero of the entire world? Is Endeavor also the second greatest hero of the entire world? Or is it just confined to the island of Japan? But anyways, so Endeavor is a piece of work. Okay, no, I take that back. He's a piece of shit. Basically, he is obsessed in obtaining the number 1 spot. He wants to overtake All Might as the number 1 hero in all of Japan / the entire world. The only problem with that is, while yes, he is 1 position lower than All Might, what we kind of don't see is that the distance is way larger, alright? Where he can't just simply step into the number 1 spot. He has to do leaps, bounds, Olympic jumps to get over the absolutely gigantic chasm of him being in number 2 and All Might being in number 1. And you know, I really like how Horikoshi kind of goes about this. Like, yes, there are some good things about this. Where Endeavor made it to number 1 because he trained hard. He worked towards that goal, and he's working towards a goal of becoming number 1. But he's stuck at being number 2 because he's not thinking beyond that. He's only thinking about being stronger. And that's how you become the number 1 hero of the world. Meanwhile, the reason why All Might is number 1 in the entire world is simply because he's trying to be the best hero he could be. He's not trying to be stronger. He's not trying to be faster. He's not trying to be smarter for the sake of publicity or just trying to maintain the number 1 spot for the same reasons Endeavor is trying to get to the number 1 spot. He made it to the number 1 spot because he's a genuinely good hero. He puts other people's lives above his own, but at the same time, he could afford to risk his life in order to save as many people as he can. And yeah, I think it's it's such a gut punch to actually realize that, because you know we're kind of introduced into this world and we kind of we think we understand the dichotomy of it, but then when you kind of really peel back the layers, you kind of realize, oh no, that's why. To see like these 2 different ideologies going at it for the same reason for maintaining the number 1 spot, but then you realize it's not. It's like Endeavor just wants to be number 1 because that's his ultimate goal. Meanwhile, All Might is number 1 because he's just a really awesome hero. So yeah, that the more I think about it, yeah, that's pretty cool. But enough about that stuff. We should probably talk a little bit more about Endeavor. So with that in mind, and trying to surpass All Might and becoming the number 1 hero, he went as far as to not only make it his problem, but also make it a generational problem. Basically, he made an arranged court marriage, which is a thing that does happen in the world of My Hero Academia, where someone with a promising quirk will marry another person with a promising quirk, and the hope is to make a supermodel child, more or less, that can either possess both quirks or a powerful version of one of those quirks that can be enhanced by the other. Yeah, the fallout of that is very immense. One of those fallouts that we're going to find out very soon, but focusing on Todoroki, once Endeavor finally managed to get Todoroki, he ran him through the ringer. Endeavor like trained him at a very young age, forcing him, very much psychologically abusing both his family and Todoroki. And the end result is this scar that Todoroki has on his eye, where his mother just has a breakdown, a complete mental meltdown pretty much, and burned him with boiling water. And I know I'm talking like a little something, but at the same time it's like, I've heard horror stories in similar veins where kids just don't come out the way the parent intended to, and the end result is like some really horrifying stuff. Like luckily for me, I never had to face those kind of situations, but hearing about those kinds of stories from people who actually went through that is very alien. But at the same time, it's a sad realization that, like, yeah, we're at the end of the day, we're all human, but that doesn't mean we're all going to have the exact same experiences. And with Todoroki, it's definitely like a very sharp contrast. Like, Endeavor is this ever looming, ever judgmental presence to Todoroki, and Todoroki does not take that lying down. He gives it to his man. He's like, hey, no. You have the other side of it, that being Midoriya, who has this really supportive mother. You know, in all intents and purposes, she tries her best. And, you know, when she finds out that Midoriya had no quirk, she really tried to support him. So, yeah. So yeah, it just kind of gives you an example of where these two characters are coming from. It's through this psychological torment that Todoroki goes through that he alienated his dad. And because of the stunt that his mother did, because of her mental breakdown, Todoroki's dad like takes her away, and like everything that Endeavor does to help Todoroki to become the #1 hero, Todoroki can't help but just resent him more, and honestly, I cannot blame him for that.
Anyways, the tournament continues.
Everyone exhibiting their quirks. We also get introduced to even more characters from class 1B, I think. Yeah, I think the number is like corresponding to the year in which the class is, and B is the exact specific class itself. That the tournament does a good job into introducing these new characters by name. However, to say that each character gets a good amount of development is no. I'd say the only character that managed to get any development in this tournament arc is Uraraka, Todoroki, Midoriya. You know, I take back Midoriya. And one character that I think is probably one of my favorite characters in My Hero Academia. That being Hitoshi Shinzo. Now, Hitoshi is a perfect example of one of the first lines that Midoriya stated in chapter 1 of the manga. That being, no one is born equal. Because Hitoshi has arguably one of the stronger, if not one of the most broken quirks in the entire series. That being, he can mind control people. And his mind control is very effective, to say the least. As we find out in his one-to-one match with Midoriya. Basically, how this quirk works is that if Hitoshi like instigates a conversation and you decide to converse with him, you are automatically mind controlled. And this is honestly a really cool superpower. And even the teachers who haven't given Hitoshi much notice is like, he can do that? And, you know, they suddenly realize, oh, they screwed up. Because when you enter UA Academy, when you do that test, as I mentioned earlier with the robots, if you score enough points, you will be put into the Heroes course. However, there are other courses that are correspondent with that. The three other departments in UA outside of the Hero course are General Education, which provides a more rounded course outside the other three courses. Students in this course, however, could transfer to other courses if they show promise, like Hitoshi. Then you have the Support Department, which is more like an engineering course. It mainly covers the making and inventions of support items, technology, tools, and gadgets that heroes would use. And the final department is the Management course, which handles the PR, agencies, and business side of hero work. So yeah, when the teachers who supervise the hero course kind of realize what Hitoshi can do, they're like, damn, fuck. But of course, since Midoriya is the main character, Midoriya wins. He manages to snap out of it. But then we get a vestige of what One for All might be, as we see silhouettes of the past users in a hallway, which we'll find out more about in a bit. But yeah, Midoriya manages to make it to the next round. His next opponent would be Todoroki. But yeah, in that fight, Midoriya manages to convince Todoroki that the power that was imbued onto him by his dear old dad is not his dad's power, it's his power, because that's one of the main struggles that Todoroki is trying to get away from, because he really resents his dad. So whenever people kind of compare him to his dad, it's like, you're Endeavor's boy. I see a bright future for you. He doesn't want to be that. He doesn't want to live in the shadow of his father. He wants to pave a path for himself. The only problem with that is his dad's shadow is pretty big. So what are Todoroki's powers exactly? This is explained later on, but so when Endeavor married Todoroki's mom, his mom has ice powers pretty much, and Endeavor has flame powers. So one of the big problems that Endeavor faces with his quirk is that he overheats sometimes. Yeah, he can emit fire, and his body is resilient enough to withstand the fire. However, if he pushes himself too much, if he lets the fire keep flowing for a little too long, if his emotions get the better of him and his fire burns a little bit harder than usual, his body will start to show damage. Now sure, it's going to take a bit, but of course, as we see later on in the series, this would be proven a detriment for Endeavor. And he kind of blames that weakness of his for not being at number one. Again, it's like the mindset is all wrong. So, in his quest to overthrow All Might, he marries Todoroki's mom because she has ice powers, and the hope is that the two of them can copulate and make a kid that has both fire and ice. And now, since Todoroki is considered a success, which, after reading the parts where that word was used a lot, is like, yeah, damn. With Todoroki being a success, he's basically the optimal version of himself, Endeavor, that Endeavor was hoping for. So Todoroki can potentially not only surpass his dad, but also surpass All Might. Things don't go that way, but we'll talk about it when we get there. So yeah, Todoroki, because he resents his dad so much, refuses to use his fire powers. Throughout everything, whether it be the entrance exams or all the other feats of strengths that the kids are forced to show throughout the series up to this point. Actually, it shouldn't be that long, damn. Todoroki has exclusively used his ice powers throughout. Even with the battle against Shigaraki and his goons, he managed to defuse the situation quite easily. Anyways, when Midoriya and Todoroki fight, Midoriya gives Todoroki a pep talk, and the result of that pep talk is that Todoroki forgets about his dad a little bit and finally decides to use his fire powers against Midoriya, and the resulting battle leaves Todoroki victorious and Midoriya defeated. Which brings us to the next big matchup in this tournament arc, that being Uraraka versus Bakugo. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the results of the battle. All I'm going to say is Uraraka lost. She had a really good strategy going. She constantly touched like pieces of debris, allowing them to float. Oh yeah, that's another thing. So Uraraka's quirk is that she can, when she touches something, she can make it float, and by touching her hands together, deactivates her quirk, makes the thing fall down. So with that in mind, she touches a bunch of debris that Bakugo kind of haphazardly allows happen. Like, she goes at Bakugo head on. Bakugo like pushes her back with his power, which is a nitroglycerin type sweat that explodes upon exposure to air. Yeah, Uraraka does this. The only problem is this is a war of attrition, and Uraraka is not fit for that. Anyways, manages to get a bunch of debris in the air, lets it go, but Bakugo manages to blast it off with a really big explosion. I was not supposed to talk about this as long as I was supposed to. Damn. The only reason why I want to talk about this fight is because we get more characterization with Uraraka. It's through characters like these, like Uraraka, like Todoroki, like, I was going to say Midoriya, but again, he's like the main character, so they're kind of like the pivotal examples of what I was expecting moving forward in this series, because you have all these characters, these named characters that have their own personal weights, they have their own admirations, they have their own dreams when it comes to becoming a hero or what they can bring to the world. This tournament arc gives us a really good way of exploring some of these characters. The problem is we don't explore as many characters as I was expecting. We only explore really Todoroki and Uraraka, but beyond that, everyone else doesn't really have time to shine, really. However, there is one character that's going to be an exception, and we're going to talk about him in a bit because he has a really prevalent arc coming up. So, Uraraka kind of explains her reasoning of becoming a hero, and her reasoning being financial stability. There's a really sweet reason to it, that simply being Uraraka really likes seeing people being happy. Her parents are always constantly working, they're really hard workers. They work in a construction company, I believe. They always like come home tired, they're always beat from the workday. So she wants to be financially stable enough to pretty much help her parents to not be tired. And not only that, and then some. She wants to like give them a full paid vacation to like Hawaii and just have them live more briskly, breezily. And yeah, see, this is what I like. This is what I want to see more of. I want to see more characterization. I want to see more goals. I just want to see characters not just being characters. I want to see them actually being like people. With Uraraka's goal, it's like, yeah, see, you could do it, Horikoshi. You could do this with more characters. My God. Anyways, after that battle, after Bakugo beats Uraraka,
and it's just before the final tournament fight between Todoroki and Bakugo that All Might reveals to Deku that before All Might had One for All, he was actually in fact quirkless. We'll learn more about where he gets the power and who the previous owner of All for One was, because she has way deeper implications to the greater story of My Hero.
That brings us to the final battle, that being Todoroki versus Bakugo. Bakugo wins. I mean, I would have put my money on Todoroki, but yeah, sure. Which brings us to the Hero Killer arc. The next arc that we're going to explore kind of changes our perception of the world a little bit. Because Ida, who is the class president of Class 1A, gets a phone call from his mother. Apparently his brother, older brother, who has already become a hero, he has his own agency, has been attacked. Ida rushes out of the tournament, visits his brother in hospital, and it turns out his brother had a run-in with this arc's villain, Stain, the hero killer. Now, Stain is pretty much your stereotypical hero who thinks he's doing the right thing by killing the unworthy heroes. Basically, his idea is that the society of My Hero Academia lost what the meaning of being a hero is. And going back to Endeavor and All Might, he's sort of right, but yeah, basically his idea is simply being that heroes now are only after status, after rank, so on and so forth. Basically, the mindset of Endeavor. But in saying that, he believes that there's only one true hero, that being All Might. And it's through this mindset where he wants to kill as many heroes as possible, but he will allow one hero to kill him, that being All Might. The Stain arc is actually, I definitely say it's one of my favorite arcs in the entire series, simply because it does give us a deeper look into the world of My Hero Academia. And that's something that I realized a lot about when going through the series, is that I find way more enjoyment actually exploring the world. Like when we get out of UA, when we're not stuck in a classroom, we're going on the streets, we're going to hero agencies, we're seeing what the top heroes are actually doing in this world. And some of the stuff that takes place in My Hero Academia is actually really interesting. The only problem is we don't really see too much about it. It's not ever present because it's called My Hero Academia. We need to go back to the classroom, and yeah, I should have just saw the name on the tin and go, so this is what I'm in for. Instead of just having this hope of grandeur for what My Hero Academia was going to be about. And I guess the reason why I'm expecting so much is the hype surrounding this series, which I think we'll talk about later on, but just in case, that being that this series was one of the biggest series at the time, so much so that conversations of it being one of the big three had sprung up, one of the big three in the modern era. And also combined with the fact that when the series released, it was around the time of the big superhero boom with actually wait, when did this first chapter come out? Around that time the MCU was in full swing. So yeah, the growth of the show was kind of inevitable, to say the least. So anyway, yeah, Ida's brother is severely injured by the hero killer, and feeling this immense pressure both by potentially becoming the next Ignesium, which is the name of that his brother takes, his superhero persona pretty much. And his brother being so bravely injured by this hero killer, Ida decides to go a little vigilante and try to take down the hero killer himself. And while this is happening, he doesn't really talk to anyone, really. When the hero studies assignment starts to come up, which allows the students to sign up with a hero agency. It's pretty much like a co-op program, pretty much, which allows the students to shadow a hero. It kind of like gives them a little bit of networking and almost gives them a guaranteed foot into the door once they graduate 3 years down the line. And oh boy, we need to talk about the 3 years thing. And this coincidentally happens after the tournament, which was a great way of getting eyes on all these students, just showing their stuff. So a lot of people have been getting recommendations from different agencies, and we even learned that certain students was given the lion's share when it comes to agencies, hoping that these kids would work with them. Now the key characters that we need to keep in mind here are Midoriya, who's actually taken up by a old hero by the name of Gran Torino. Yes, that's a reference. Horikoshi loves his references. Ida, who doesn't sign on with his brother's agency, but rather signs on with an agency that is close to the area where the hero killer was last seen. And then we have Todoroki, who was forced to sign on with his dad's agency. And everyone else is doing their own thing. Bakugo is getting his hair trimmed by Best Genius. Fantastic. Ochako is with Gunhead, which yeah, it's the banter between those two is very fun. And yeah, it's those are the only notable characters I can really think about. It's just those three. Anyways, so the old saying, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it? You're welcome, Ida. So yeah, Ida joins this agency with ulterior motives in hopes of hunting down the hero killer. Meanwhile, Midoriya, with his hero that he's shadowing, that being Gran Torino, is revealed to be the coach to All Might. And yeah, as soon as All Might learns that Gran Torino is interested in Midoriya, All Might is pretty much okay, listen, I might be freaking out, but you should definitely freak out. So yeah, with that in mind, Gran Torino actually helps Midoriya trying to control his power because the old man managed to see that Midoriya is a new carrier for One for All. So he decides to take him on to help train him to become the next symbol of peace, pretty much. And through some simple explanation, Midoriya finally manages to find a way to control his power to the point where he doesn't need to turn his arms and legs into jelly. Which yeah, you kind of need for going into the hero course. Now after Midoriya kind of has a rough idea as to how to do it thanks to a microwave. Thank you, Horikoshi. Both him and Gran Torino decide to go on patrol, and they decide to go to a different location via train. However, the train ride is cut short. Why? Well, yeah, the League of Villains. I think I neglected to say that name. So, Shigaraki, the guy who infiltrated UA not too long ago to try and kill All Might with the Nomu, has this little league called the League of Villains. Anyways, he's kind of desperate for new recruits to try and appease his master. Who's his master? We'll talk more about that when we get there. Anyway, Shigaraki is very interested in Stain, the hero killer. So he decides to negotiate with them. The negotiations go as well as the negotiations just go bad. We'll just say that. And Stain is just not interested at all as to what Shigaraki is selling. So with that in mind, Shigaraki just lets Stain go and do his business. But Shigaraki has a bruised ego now. Yeah, so that's the thing about Shigaraki. He's very much a man-child in this series, or at least in this part of the series, not wanting to be overshadowed by Stain, the hero killer, because apparently their little stunt at UA with the Nomu and badly injuring All Might isn't really getting a lot of press. So with that in mind, he lets 3 Nomu out in the same area that they dropped off Stain. Shortly after that, chaos starts to ensue. One of those being that, hey, remember when I said Midoriya and Gran Torino were on the train? Yeah, one of the Nomu crashes through the train in a fight with other superheroes that are in the local area. Very soon, Endeavor himself also gets the call about this, and he and Todoroki intercept. And while all of this is happening, Ida actually leaves his post with the hero agency that he's working with because they're also getting caught up in the Nomu attack. He runs down an alley where he finds Stain about to claim his next victim, but he manages to stop it, but not unscathed. And it's soon revealed that Stain has a pretty ridiculously powerful quirk too, albeit a nasty one. I hope none of you are hemophobic, because Stain's power is that he can paralyze anyone whose blood he's ingested. Pretty gross, but okay. So yeah, that's how he practically manages to get away with a lot of the attacks that he pulled off. Simply even having a smidgen, a small drop of blood, is more than enough for his quirk to take effect. Now granted, it's revealed that the effects of this quirk is really dependent on blood type. So there's certain blood types that he's really proficient in, and you will stay paralyzed for a lot longer, but there's other blood types that he's not knowledgeable of, hence their effects are a lot shorter. So yeah, Ida barges in, tries to stop the hero killer, and fails miserably in trying to avenge his brother, who's still alive, by the way. He's just he's seen better days, we'll just say that. And Midoriya, who's also really worried about his friend, and also realizing that the place that the train was forcibly stopped at is close to where Ida's agency is, decides to go and find him, just out of worry. And luckily, he manages to intervene just in time before Stain could deal the final finishing blow onto Ida and the other hero that he was trying to murder. I remember this fight being way more impactful in the anime, which I might talk about later, but yeah, we'll see. But yeah, the fight is actually a lot faster than what I was expecting, especially given the build-up of Stain, which wasn't all that long too, but we gotta keep moving. It's pretty interesting to see the pace of the series going as slow and as fast as it is, because it really feels like something like this should had a little bit more time in the oven to cook, pretty much. Anyways, Midoriya tries to fight Stain, and the results of the fight are a little mixed, to say the least. Basically, this is a long way of me simply saying Stain got some of Midoriya's blood. But as all hope seems to be lost, Todoroki steps in. Now with him, Midoriya, and Ida back on their feet, they manage to stop Stain. And they stop him by pummeling the absolute living hell out of him. But yeah, as they're trying to make their retreat, the Nomu are still causing problems. And then Stain proceeds to do something that is pretty cool. He manages to get some of the blood of the Nomu, paralyze it, and then kill it. Basically, this man has a will harder than iron, to say the least. I had to use iron. Anyways, yeah, Stain does this whole spiel about what he's doing is for the betterment of society, and of course, this is going to have a bit of an impact. Mainly because, yeah, he's saying all these things, but people are going to get the wrong context of it, and will proceed to follow in his steps for the wrong reasons. And yeah, that's one of the major strengths about My Hero Academia. There are certain consequences that happen throughout the series, and it either comes back and bites the main heroes in the butt, or it actually benefits them for a better tomorrow. And there's a really good example of this when we reach the end of the series. So yeah, after Stain does his whole spiel, he deadlocks in place, because apparently when Ida and Midoriya did the wombo combo on him, he broke one of his ribs, and one of those pieces of rib got into his lungs, and he's just standing there like a statue. And yeah, he survives, but no, it's Like, all that was really cool and all, but when he's just, like, standing there, I just can't help but laugh. It's kind of funny. But yeah, with the Nomu defeated, and by defeated I mean, like, murdered, we then catch up with the League of Villains, who have two very important members, Himiko Toga and Dabi. We'll talk more about Dabi in a bit, along with Himiko Toga. Also, I just realized Himiko, like, hemoglobin, I guess? Anyways, after that very impressive arc, whole shebang, that whole shabacle, after seeing the potential consequences rippling out from the events of Stain, after his speech was leaked online, what's going to happen next in My Hero Academia? What is the next big thing after this are they going to do? What will the students do next? They're doing another exercise. Oh! And you know what's so funny? I completely forgot about this. I seriously forgot about, like, right now I have the manga loaded just in case I misremember things, because I almost did before, because I thought right after the tournament arc we actually go into another really prevalent arc, but then I remembered, wait a minute, no, Stain, yeah, that guy. Wait a minute, and it's because of that I decided, okay, maybe I should just have the manga loaded up on my tablet, and then as I'm going through, I just remembered, right? They had another exercise that they needed to do. Why? And listen, it's like I get it. It's like it's My Hero Academia. It's My Hero Academia, but that academia part is really carrying a lot. Oh no. And you know, it's like, it's the constant reuse of certain ideas that I'm not really fully behind on, and I just wish that that either we had this earlier in correspondence, or just had something very different for this part, because as I'm going to explain when we get closer to the end of the series. Like, there's so much they could have done with this series idea, but I feel like what we ended up getting isn't exactly the full potential of My Hero Academia. There's not so much the My Hero part, it's just a lot of the academia part, which, yeah, it's in the title, but at the same time, there's just so much more potential to the series beyond what is being presented. But yeah. Alright, so there is one thing I do want to point out about some of the chapters of My Hero, because at the end there will be excerpts from the author himself. Either he's talking about certain characters, like their designs and their influences, or making a correction from a previous chapter, or just doing funny little gaffes like these, like Uraraka's Touchingly Frugal Life, where it's just her giving us small pieces of advice of how to live, and some of these pieces of advice are just terrible. Like, what do you eat? Just water, because eating food costs too much money. But then you have like cute ones like this where it's like, first way to save, being awake costs money, just sleep. So they have a final exam that they need to do. Now, the caveat of this exam is that, you know, if you fail the exam, then you don't get to go to the place of the next arc, that being a summer camp, pretty much. So, the exam is consistent of two parts. There's a written exam that takes up 50% of the final grade, and then there's a physical exam, which, you know where I'm going with this. So yeah, the written exam goes, students are doing the study montage thing, but then you have the physical exam, which is basically the students being paired up with another student, going up against one of the teachers in a very intense game of cuff tag. So basically the teachers are posed as villains, and the students need to either A, capture the villain with these handcuffs that they have, or B, make it out through an exit in the exam area. Now, the two notable things to talk about, one being that 4 out of 5 students didn't manage to pass the exam, because they failed the second portion. And the other thing to mention is Midoriya and Bakugo had to team up, and the teacher that they had to face against is All Might. You know, the literal greatest hero of our time. if I had a gym teacher who happened to be like, I don't know, Cristiano Ronaldo, and he's like, all right, let's play soccer. Nah, I'm good. Alright, now moving into the next arc, because the next two arcs are actually pretty big. They kind of like coincide with each other. I even argue to say that they're the same arc, but that being the training camp arc, pretty much. In preparations to go to camp, all the students go to the shopping mall, and that's where Midoriya is confronted with a very discouraged Shigaraki. Shigaraki's pretty much kind of annoyed because everyone is still talking about Stain, the hero killer. And you know, the conversation that they mainly have is like, well, why are people talking about the hero killer? Come on, Midoriya, tell me why. And then Midoriya just kind of reveals to Shigaraki that what makes the hero killer different is that he has ideals. He's trying to call these heroes who claim to be heroes and leave those who he thinks are true heroes who have similar ideologies as All Might.
So after surviving that encounter,
everyone manages to go, but the only exception is that the 5 students that failed have to attend a study camp, pretty much. So while everyone else is kind of like having fun, they have extra studies that they need to do to make up for their failure at the initial exam. So with that in mind, everyone kind of goes about their days. They're just kind of learning their quirks, and they're also improving their quirks. They're trying to get stronger. Also, this is where we meet the little kid Koda, who decks Decker with the balls. Like, it's no warning. It's like, hey, how you doing, champ? I don't know. It's like the way it's drawn, and even in the anime, it's like, I don't know where I'm fucking dying from. It's just all funny. But yeah, it's revealed through Koda's aunt that Koda does not like heroes simply because his parents were heroes and they were killed by a villain. And we'll talk more about that villain soon, because there he is showing up with the League of Villains. So yeah, Koda isn't exactly... He's not like pro-villain or anything. He just kind of wishes that everyone just would stop it. Like, he would very much rather everyone be quirkless and normal and not do the terrible things that they're doing. So anyways, League of Villains show up. They do their thing. The students realize, well, here we go again, guys. So yeah, it's like, I will say this, I do appreciate how the characters do take these situations kind of seriously. I think more often than not, when these kind of scenarios happen in other shonen, it's kind of played off half-heartedly, pretty much. Like, pretty much every character is kind of like Bakugo in other series, to say the least. So yeah, students, new objective unlock. Survive. And this is where we're introduced to 2 other villains that have recently joined the ranks of the League of Villains. That being Twice and Spinner, I believe his name is. I might be remembering that wrong, but yeah. So yeah, what are the League of Villains doing here exactly? Even the students are kind of confused. It's like, wait a minute, aren't these the guys that tried to kill All Might? That's weird because All Might's not here. But no, it turns out that they have an ulterior motive. They have another goal in mind. And we're going to find that out pretty soon. So yeah, some of the students, while they know what to do, some of them are running around like a chicken with its head cut off. Midoriya goes to the place where Koda is known to be, and that's where both him and Koda are confronted with Koda's parents' killer, that being this big muscle guy. He isn't here for long, okay? I don't need to remember his name. If anything, there are 20 other characters that I should have remembered the names for. But I couldn't. I didn't. Simply because how this story is set up. I'm just saying. But yeah, Midoriya, having a better handle of his powers now, still can't really keep up with Muscle. But yeah, he gives it his all to the point where he damaged himself really badly. Like, to a degree where lasting consequences could potentially occur from this, and we do hear about it later on. But yeah, so Midoriya, looking more and more like a grape of sorts, a blueberry, if you will, has to retreat with Koda after defeating Muscle. And it's through the conversations with these villains as they're going about that they realize that the villains aren't here to kill somebody, they're here to kidnap somebody. Who's that somebody? Bakugo. I think this is the perfect time to talk about Bakugo, I guess. And it's kind of hard to like take Bakugo seriously when almost everything that comes out of his mouth is like, it's like that open edgelord. Like, I swear to God, it's like almost every time he speaks, he can't just form a single sentence without the word of kill or damn or what did you say? Like, it's so, he's the stereotypical, not antagonist, a rival character more or less. Okay, so there's like two versions of Bakugo in this, alright? And it's probably not what you think. There's the Bakugo that we see, you know, he's actively talking, we hear his thoughts, so on and so forth. And then there's the Bakugo that is implied in the series. What do I mean by that? So in UA, it's not just about being the strongest or the fastest or being so in tune to your quirk. It's also about having certain intelligence. Like, can you memorize evacuation paths? Can you identify certain injuries on a person? Basically, heroes in this universe are what's the word I'm looking for? I guess glorified first responders. Like, they have to be police, they have to be medics, they have to be firefighters, so on and so forth. So to be like that, you need to have certain knowledge when it comes to these kind of scenarios. Bakugo doesn't come as a guy who possesses that. Like, there is a deeper implication to that character. Like, there are moments where the other characters are saying how, oh, yeah, Bakugo's a bit of a hothead, but he genuinely cares. Sometimes he'll watch out for others. When he says he's going to do something, he'll do it, and we do see that. But, you know, when it comes to, like, taking tests and memorizing certain things, Bakugo just does not come across like that. Like, what really broke my immersion about that kind of image for Bakugo was every time we kind of get a view into his thoughts, which isn't a lot. I think it only happens like around 3 or 4 times, maybe even a bit more than that. But, you know, like, his thoughts aren't all that different to what he's actually saying. So, with his thought bubble going, dummy Deku or stupid Deku, like, there's a part of me that just can't really correlate how this kid is the second best or like one of the top 5 best in the class when he presents himself in such a way. And I think the problem here is that Horikoshi didn't really go the extra mile in showing that other side of Bakugo. There's like some generally intriguing stuff to him that is hinted, not expressly showcased, hinted. And yeah, I wish we kind of saw more of that side of him, but instead we're just kind of given this, pretty much. If there's one character that I think kind of comes close to Bakugo, and I think a lot of people are going to be mad at me when I say this, it's Endeavor, pretty much. Because they both have that kind of same mindset that they need to be stronger, and if they cannot surpass a certain point, that's because they're weak. We need to be stronger than the competition. Every time Bakugo talks about being a top hero, he always talks about feats of strength, pretty much. Like, he doesn't really think when in the moment. But, you know, I think, like, he does cool off a bit in the coming events. The problem is he's very loud, and he's very annoying. Some people are probably going to have a problem with that, but hey, there's, like, characters that I prefer more over others, and Bakugo is not a character that I fuck with. Yeah, sorry, but I just don't like Bakugo. I'm sorry. Both Class 1A and Class 1B are just trying to survive. They're making their way through. And once they finally realize what the villains want, Bakugo becomes, like, top priority. However, because Bakugo is Bakugo, pretty much, Bakugo gets caught. Like, there's even a moment where they're like, okay, listen, this is what we're going to do. We're going to have, like, we're going to surround you, Bakugo, and we're going to keep going. And then Bakugo's like, no. And it's because of his hubris, because he thinks he's this bigger than life thing, because he needs to be confronted with the worst case scenario that could happen. And yeah, that will lead us like straight into the next arc. But yeah, basically, Bakugo and his hubris ends up getting captured. Good job, dumbass. Anyways, like the other students of 1A and 1B are just helpless. They try to get him back, but it proves fruitless to say the least. And Bakugo is kidnapped by the villains. Why did they kidnap him? Well, you see, given how Bakugo presents himself continuously, the League of Villains mistook how he presents himself. And I will say this about Bakugo: like, he has an iron will. He has a goal in mind. He will go for it. That is really cool. The problem is how he presents himself. That's the problem that I have with this character. And so when he's like going off about how he's gonna be number one and how he's gonna like murder people, it's like, of course the villains are like, huh. Hey yo, I think this kid is kind of cool. I think this kid is chill. Maybe he'll join our club. Maybe we'll join our league. Yeah, I am glad for what will come next, where Bakugo just kind of comes to realize, so I might have ended All Might's career. So yeah, the news of Bakugo being kidnapped like spreads like wildfire. The general public is starting to get kind of antsy about UA as a school, because now it's like, should we really trust you? Are you really as competent as we thought you were? Is this truly the best that you could provide? And it turns out that UA is 5 steps ahead of all the reporters, because secretly, as the principal, along with the Aizawa and someone else, who was that? Oh yeah, and it's Vlad. It's, yeah, cat guy. I mean, he kind of looks like a cat guy. Anyways, so yeah, while those three are giving a press conference about the ongoing situation with Bakugo being kidnapped, meanwhile with Bakugo being kidnapped, the League of Villains try to like turn him to his side, but Bakugo is like, no. Basically, they completely misread the situation. It's like, yes, Bakugo wants to be a hero. It's just the way he presents himself that kind of made the League of Villains kind of confused. And yeah, it's during all of this that we realize that there's a whole secret operation between the top heroes and the local police departments to raid the League of Villains. Basically, the League of Villains made big enough of a splash that they've ended up in a lot of people's radars, in spite of what Shigaraki stated about Stain. But yeah, they managed to locate Bakugo, and with the help of Yayorozu, I believe that's her name, or Momo. Man, it feels so weird to use like her name Momo, and I'm about to talk about the no Mu. Anyways, during the attack on the camp, Momo managed to attach a tracker to one of the Nomu that were going wild with the League of Villains. So yeah, they have a general location as to where both the Nomu and Bakugo might be. And they know through like certain investigation works, like they got eyewitness testimony saying that, oh, there's this place that's been abandoned, and the owner is like, yeah, it's abandoned, but I'm seeing people coming out of there, so I don't know. And thus the raid begins. They, All Might, along with Endeavor, Mount Lady, other heroes whose names I can't be bothered to remember, break in and try to get Bakugo. Also, it should be noted that while this whole raid is going on, Deku, Kirishima, Ida, Todoroki, Momo tried to save Bakugo themselves. Very soon they'll realize that was a bad idea. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, they're going to succeed, but still, what they did was a really bad idea, because as this raid is going on, the secret big bad of the series reveals himself. So, throughout the series, All Might teases Deku about this ultimate evil that he needs to go up against, that being One for All. I mean, All for One. Shit. And how he might be responsible for some of the recent villain activity, not just the League of Villains. That being the main quirk for All for One being that he can take and imbue quirks on anybody. So yeah, this man for the past 100 or so years, as All Might stated, has slowly been accumulating quirks. However, there was an incident 5 years before the events of My Hero Academia started, where All Might and All for One had a final confrontation, so to speak, and that left All Might with a debilitating injury. However, All Might landed a pretty significant blow onto All for One, and the blow was significant enough that All Might believed that he killed All for One. He did not kill All for One, as it's revealed that All for One is the guy who's behind everything. He was behind Nomu, he was behind the League of Villains, he was not behind Stain, however, that was completely unrelated. And now that his Nomu facility has been raided, his pupil, that being Tomoru Shigaraki, is about to be captured, he reveals himself and he makes his presence known. This arc is one of my favorites in My Hero Academia, simply because it feels like a final act arc, while not being a final act arc. It has so much weight to it, simply because it's so early. It introduces so many final endgame moments in this arc, and because it happened so early, we are going to be dealt with the consequences of this arc moving forward with the series, and that's what made it so exciting for me. I remember seeing clips of this when the season of the anime was playing, and was even thinking, wow, I guess My Hero Academia is ending. That was almost... I don't think it was... Actually, wait, no, yeah, it was almost like a decade ago, now I think about it. So yeah, it's like, this is what makes the arc so impactful. So, why is it so impactful outside of the things that I mentioned? Well, you're about to find out. So, All for One shows himself, and the school kids that decided to tag along in this little journey trying to save Bakugo realize for the first time how way over their heads this whole situation is. Oh yeah, I should probably mention, like, before this battle, like, kind of took off, All for One managed to transport Shigaraki and the League of Villains out of the arena and have them transported to another location. And throughout the fight, because Bakugo was still there, and the kids were also there, but All Might didn't know, All Might was actively holding himself back. They managed to devise a plan to actually save Bakugo, and it's so funny how they have to also play in line with how Bakugo feels. And, you know, again, it's like, I understand what they're trying to go for, but at the same time, like, this is a life and death situation. You mess up, then what happens, I guess. And, you know, they had to, you know, play their cards, not so much right, but put them in the right places. So, you know, it's like, it's funny how they have to have a discussion about, listen, if it's me, if it's Midoriya who's going to save Bakugo, he's not going to accept that, and probably going to get himself into more hot water. I mean, Big Bad is right there. So, you know, they devise a plan to save Bakugo, and they pull it off by having Kirishima be the one who lends his hand to save Bakugo. And they managed to pull that off. Not flawlessly, like, there were a couple of close calls. And yeah, that kind of brings us to the main fight. The greatest hero of our time against the greatest villain of all time. The first fight between All Might and All for One definitely had me at the edge of my seat when it comes to the stakes of it. Because throughout the series, up to this point, All Might has slowly but surely been getting less powerful. And that fight with the Nomu is a huge jump in All Might's regression. And because he passed on All for One to Deku, he has been even more severely weakened, as we're going to find out, you know, how All for One works in this arc itself. Basically, what All Might has now is not so much the quirk itself, but rather the remaining burning embers of it. And, you know, yeah, he could still perform some feats, but he's not working at 100%. He's more or less working at 20%, to say the least, or 40% even. Basically, he's not as strong as people hope he was. So when the final battle is going on, it is like tooth and nail. It is very close. And it's very close in the fact that All Might really bullshitted his way to that win. Like, he was taking hit after hit after hit from All for One, and it got to the point where he actually regressed back into his older man form. And he was, now the secret's out. Wizard has been revealed at the back of the curtain. Basically, All Might's true form has been revealed, and the world realized,
And the hits keep on coming for All Might, as All for One reveals that Tomura Shigaraki is the grandson of Nana Shimura, All Might's late master and the previous wielder of One for All.
Now, I really do like how this whole thing kind of plays out, because it's kind of like, at first people are like, oh, we'll be fine because we'll always find a way. But then as the severity of the situation progresses, without All Might being, being in that position that he was, being the symbol of peace, certain people become a little bit more brazened, and other folks start losing a bit more hope. So yeah, to say All Might is backed up into a corner in this fight is the understatement of the entire series, to say the least. And you know what? It's this battle that really shows why he's number one. There's a woman trapped behind him. Instead of taking the risk to kind of save her because he would be exposing his back, or going full head on to All for One, he stands his ground, blocks the coming attack from All for One, and manages to hold his ground against this villain, while also blocking the attack that All for One sent at him, and managed to protect the girl. And that kind of shows why All Might is the number one hero in the entire world. I keep saying it, but again, it's honestly such a good concept, and I'm really glad they went in that direction with this character, because there's another character later on that we'll talk about that All Might could have been, but he isn't. So yeah, All Might, with the last remaining embers of One for All by his side, manages to land one decisive blow against All for One. So yeah, it's after All Might lands that one punch, literally pulling that right out of his ass, the day is saved, to say the least. All for One is captured and is transported to a high security prison called Tartarus. However, the villains have been rounded up, the Nomu lab has been destroyed, but it's safe to say that the end result of this fight was a lot more costly than people in the world were thinking. Because All Might does the finger point. Yeah, it's your turn now, pretty much. So that is the end of that arc, pretty much. Okay, so when the whole Bakugo situation ended, UA now being a little bit paranoid, because it's okay, so how did the League of Villains find out where we were? We didn't leak that, right? Decided to set up a dorm program. Now, when they announced this, some of the parents are like, oh yeah, no, go ahead, take a little whippersnapper. But some of them were very hesitant about it. A really good example of this is being Midoriya's mom, who was like, I don't know, my kid's hurting pretty bad. But All Might manages to convince her, and she relents, and yeah, everyone moves into these dorms that are on campus. Also, there's this thing about ultimate moves, and this is where we're met up with Mammalian. Gonna skip that because we'll talk more about him later on. It becomes way more prevalent outside of here. And thus, this brings us to the Provisional Hero License Exam arc. And you know what? This art kind of personifies what I mean about certain story elements being reused a lot. Like, I know sound like a broken record at this point, but it cannot be stated enough. Like, this is what I imagine the UA Sports Festival art to be, where you have students from all across the country, from different schools, competing together in a Olympic-style tournament, pretty much. And while I do appreciate this art for one thing, that being a little bit of world building, because it does go into the mechanics of becoming a hero, my problem with it is, like, this is yet another extension of the school setting. So this is more or less the school program, so to speak, because there are programs stated in My Hero Academia where if you don't go to a hero course or a hero school, you can still apply to become a hero. You just need to go through similar tests, if not the same tests. But is that exactly the case? We don't know. Because again, I could easily say, like, the provisional hero licensing exam arc is where older folks who want to become heroes will attend. However, throughout this arc, we never really see anyone outside of the age group of students, pretty much. High school students, to be exact. Anyways, the one notable thing I could really say about this arc is probably the inclusion of Toga, where we see her quirk. Basically, she's a vampire. She can suck the blood of anyone that she comes in contact with, and that allows her to transform into that person. That's actually something about her character, which we'll talk about in the later arcs. I think we could that we should mention is I think it's Shiketsu High School. Some of the characters there also fail the license exam, and one of them I think is actually kind of pivotal because he kind of adds to Todoroki's character. This arc actually introduces an important character by the name of Inasa Yorashi. And I only say that because he adds to Todoroki's character. One of the core elements of Todoroki is that he's trying to escape his father's shadow. However, because of how big his father is, he can't help but be stuck in it. And Inasa, who had a experience with Endeavor, it's nothing too bad. It's just Endeavor kind of brushed him off, and it affected him moving forward. And then when he's confronted with Todoroki, he's like, "You're Endeavor's kid, right? I don't like you." We're just saying a lot because this guy loves everything. And with that, the only other notable thing to say about that arc is everyone in Class 1A managed to get their licenses except for two, that being Todoroki and Bakugo. And because Bakugo didn't get his provisional license, and the trauma from the incidents of being kidnapped by the villains, not the trauma of being kidnapped itself, but rather the aftermath of him being kidnapped, which is All Might retiring and, you know, not being All Might anymore, pretty much. Which kind of culminates into what's going to happen next. What I think is arguably one of the more pivotal fights in My Hero Academia, where Izuku Midoriya and Katsuki Bakugo finally go head to head. They finally clear the air, more or less, by throwing fists. Bakugo is very hurt, pretty much. Not physically, but emotionally, because he kind of blames himself for the end of All Might, because that's what's happening. All Might is at a state where he cannot keep his form for more than a minute, pretty much. So he announces his retirement, thus ending the era of the symbol of peace, pretty much. And this really does weigh on Bakugo quite a bit, to the point where he faces off against Midoriya. So it should be noted that throughout the series, Deku was kind of giving hints to Bakugo. Like, during one of the exams, he blurted out as, like, "This power is not mine, I'm borrowing it." And Bakugo is like, "The hell are you talking about? Get away from me." But yeah, Bakugo, not having forgotten about that, confronts Midoriya about it, and kind of like putting two and two together and realizing, oh, so this power that you probably got from All Might, that might be the reason why he's so much weaker, but he's worse off now because of me. So this whole fight that ends up happening is a show of strength, pretty much. Bakugo and Midoriya, they've clashed their heads before. Shivers, get your head out of the gutter. Basically, they both want the same thing, for different reasons though. Like, Midoriya is more in line to what All Might is as a hero. Bakugo is closer to what Endeavor is when it comes to becoming a hero. So yeah, it's like, what Bakugo is proposing with this fight isn't unreasonable. He simply wants to see if he's strong enough. If he's strong enough and if Midoriya is strong enough to see what's coming. Because again, they had like this super traumatic incident, and throughout this series, whenever they're confronted with the League of Villains, all the students just kind of have this moment where they kind of need to think about if they're really cut out for this. So yeah, they clash, and Bakugo wins, and he's like, well, I guess we're fucked. But yeah, they kind of have a little bit of banter, and at the end they both have a goal to try and surpass each other. Midoriya wants to become the #1 hero, so he'll get stronger. Bakugo is still aiming to become the #1 hero as well, so he's aiming to become stronger. And since Bakugo managed to get some of the pieces together, All Might lets him in on the whole secret with All for One and One for All. Now this brings us to one of my favorite arcs, that being the Shei Hasaki arc?
But I much prefer calling it the overhaul arc.
Now basically in this arc, it's pretty much like the Hero Killers arc, where the characters need to go shadow another hero through an internship program. However, at this point, the teachers of UA are very hesitant of that. I mean, the whole reason why they did the dorm program to begin with is to try and keep their students safe by keeping them not only close to professional heroes, but also close to each other, because these kids, again, are not pushovers. However, given the fact that the villains attacked the training camp, which UA changed the location of that in the last minute, and yet somehow the villains still managed to find them, and with the real threat that there's a possible mole within UA amongst the teachers, they really didn't want to take a risk in having to have the students out on an internship. However, they relent, and the internship program proceeds. And in this arc, we follow mainly two characters, that being Midoriya himself, and another character who I failed to mention up until now, mainly because he's more prevalent in this arc than he is in his initial appearance, that being Mammalian. Now, the reason why I say this arc is one of my favorites is that it kind of brings up two key things that I really want to see in My Hero Academia. Number one, it introduces some world building through the main villain of this arc, that being the old Yakuza that once ruled the underworld. Number two, it hits a soft spot for me because specifically with the heroism that both Izuku and Mammalian are going to show. Mammalian or Miro, but for this video I'm just going to call him Mammalian because again, for some of these characters I only remember them by the hero names.
Anyways, it's implied that the Yakuza were pretty prevalent in the early days.
However, since the rise of quirks, the Yakuza have slowly but surely been losing power throughout the years. And then with the rise of a certain shadowy villain character, actually I don't know why I'm saying that, after the rise of All for One, the Yakuza more or less just kind of lost their grip. And now we see the remnants of that Yakuza group, because the former leader of the Yakuza is like, listen, dude, things happen, let's just move on. But the villain, whose name is Overhaul. Anyways, Overhaul is hoping to bring back the Yakuza to more prevalence, and he aims to do that by using these specialized bullets that can remove one's quirk.
Anyways, with some encouragement from Gran Torino, Deku would then proceed to join Lemillion at the hero agency that he's attending. This agency would be led by All Might's old sidekick, Night Eye.
So yeah, after Night Eye accepts Midoriya into his agency, they set off to try and find the big bad of this arc, that being Overhaul. And it soon revealed that Overhaul has a daughter. Except that's not his daughter, but we'll talk about that. This is Eri, and she's probably, arguably, one of the strongest characters in the entire series, simply because her power allows her the ability to rewind anything she touches to a previous point. And to give you all an example of how powerful she is, one time, while she was still with her real parents, her father kind of came up to her, and I think she touched him and regressed him all the way back to nothing, pretty much. So yeah, anyways, when Midoriya and Mammalian are on patrol helping Night Eye with his investigation on the Yakuza, they accidentally bump into both Eri and Overhaul. Now, both of them are well aware of what's actually going on, but they can't really do anything at the moment. And Overhaul, very subtly threatening their lives, and Eri picks up on this, goes with Overhaul in her best attempt to try and spare both Midoriya and Mammalian. Because Overhaul's quirk is kind of like Eri's, where he could dismantle and reassemble any object that he touches. So there have been multiple examples in this arc where he will touch somebody and they just explode, but then he manages to bring them back. So yeah, as the investigation continues, Night Eye finally manages to locate where Overhaul is hidden out. Now, while the main goal of this investigation is to stop the Yakuza, there is a secondary objective, and this objective is arguably as important as taking out the Yakuza that is hoping to regress all of Quark society back to the old days. Sorry, my computer just turned on. Just go back to sleep, man. That secondary objective simply being to save Eri. Now, I will admit I'm always going to be a sucker for the rescue mission type of arcs. So yeah, this arc just kind of ticks a lot of boxes for me. You have a big bad, you have an innocent little girl being abused by the big bad, and then you have the heroes that are determined to save that innocent life. And yeah, this is where the series goes off the beaten path a little bit. We see the school kids teaming up with actual heroes, because this is a joint effort between different agencies. And they break into the Yakuza's headquarters. And of course, with great difficulty, each of these heroes have to face off against some villains. It should also be noted that at this point, the Yakuza are also teaming up with the League of Villains. However, I swear to God, the League of Villains, mainly Shigaraki, does not like to play nicely with anyone else. The Yakuza are hey, listen, if you help us out, we'll help you out. But of course, you need to listen to us. And Shigaraki's no. Shigaraki is very prideful throughout the series, and he's he's kind of like Bakugo now I think about it. But yeah, he's very prideful, he's very boastful, he doesn't want to be overshadowed, which is kind of evident given the Hero Killer arc. But yeah, he just basically wants to be in control, even though that might not be the most optimal way to go. And of course, at this point, Shigaraki's kind of spinning because his master, All For One, has been detained. So yeah, the heroes go through this labyrinth of a hideout, but soon the final confrontation comes ahead. It is Midoriya, Overhaul, Mammalian, Night Eye, and they are all after the same prize, that being Eri. Yeah, and I think this is where we actually see our first death in My Hero Academia, that being Night Eye. Overhaul, with his quirk, managed to pierce him with a stone spike, or cement spike. What's that foundation made out of? We also have Mammalian sadly losing his quirk due to the quirk erasing bullets, all in an attempt to try and protect Eri. And as the fight continues, with Night Eye gravely injured and on the brink of death, and Mammalian losing his quirk, it is now down to Midoriya to take out Overhaul. And with the help of Eri, he manages to do so. Okay, so quick explanation. So remember how every time Midoriya uses One for All, his arms and legs turn into jelly because his body is incapable of handling the quirk? Well, with the help of Eri, whose quirk is, reminder, to reverse the state of whatever she's holding, Midoriya is able to go full out ballistic on Overhaul, because outside of the few moments at the beginning of the series, Midoriya has been going at certain situations with One for All at 100%, and that's why his body keeps breaking. But with the aid of Eri, he's able to go at 100% and still maintain his body, simply because Eri's quirk is reverting them back to a point where his arms and legs aren't jelly. And it's because of that little support that Midoriya manages to defeat Overhaul. However, when he lands the finishing blow, things start to go awry, Eri's quirk starts to go a little crazy, but with the aid of Aizawa, who I don't think I've ever mentioned it, so their teacher, Aizawa, or Eraserhead, his quirk is that he can deactivate anyone's quirk by simply staring at him. However, if he breaks contact, then the effect is immediately worn off. So yeah, the day is saved, and so many people are injured and one guy died.
Also, while Overhaul was being transported by the proper authorities, the League of Villains would attack, and Shigaraki would proceed to cripple Overhaul by using his rock quirk, proceeds to take away Overhaul's arms, leaving him a double amputee, and would steal the remaining quirk erasing bullets off of Overhaul.
But outside of that, Eri manages to be saved, and Aizawa actually ends up adopting her. And then we have the remedial course arc. I don't think I need to talk about this one. It's simply everyone who failed the Hero Provisional License exam in the previous arc before the Yakuza arc. So basically, Bakugo, Todoroki, and some of the students from Shiketsu High School have to do a follow-up to try in a second attempt to get their licenses. But instead of what it was before, it is them doing other tasks, like babysitting kids. It's like what I said before about how heroes are pretty much glorified first responders, right? They need to be firefighters, they need to be paramedics. So they pretty much need to recover everything that they probably were taught in school, but this time being proven in this official government program that grants them their hero's license. Which brings us to the UA School Festival arc. Now this is the one time where the school element is actually welcomed, because up until this point, everything that we've been seeing on the school side of My Hero Academia has been nothing more but tests, physical examinations, more tests, tournament arc, more tests. But yeah, this is the first time that we see the students actually doing something in school, pretty much. And while I say there isn't really much to note here, there isn't really any progression of any of the characters, maybe with the exception of Jiro, but even then, it's very minimal, to say the least, and after this point, we never really follow up on her as a character again, pretty much. But yeah, I'd say the one notable thing about this arc has to be the introduction of two villain characters, that being La Brava and Gentle Criminal. Now, I honestly like these two simply because, it's basically these two lost individuals who end up finding each other and they try to make something work. Because yeah, these two are kind of like skirting the line between villain and vigilante, and also I can't wait to talk about when these two show up again, because when they show up again, they come clutch. But yeah, the festival just proceeds without any incident. There was almost an incident, but Midoriya stops Gentle Criminal and La Brava from sabotaging the UA School Festival. But yeah, that was the UA School Festival arc, I guess. It's a fun little arc. It's nice to deviate from, everything else that happened and do something that schools actually do. Which brings us to the arc that finally shows us the aftermath of All Might retiring. That being the Pro Hero arc. Now this is where we're introduced to other characters, mainly Hawks, Best Genus, Edshot, Mirko, Crust, and of course the most important character of all, Wash. He's just a washing machine, man. Anyways, this is a coming of moment for Endeavor, because now he finally manages to gain the #1 spot. However, he didn't gain it through the means that he thought were necessary. He gained it because All Might is, he's retired. And, it finally starts to weigh on him what it means to be #1. He realizes the reason why All Might was there. And as I explained before, is because All Might was prioritizing of being a good hero. He didn't really care about rank, which is what Endeavor was after. Once he finally achieved what he was after for so long, if the weight of everything finally comes crashing down on him, and then he realizes that everything that he's done, tormenting his family, constantly training, just having little regard for the people around him, it really starts to weigh on him, and he tries to find a way to make amends. And not too long after Endeavor gains the #1 spot, his ire, more or less, is put to the ultimate test. How is he tested? Oh, through a super powerful no move that shows up. And you know what? This battle just kind of perfectly personifies what I said before, how the gap between All Might and Endeavor isn't even close, alright? He has to do leaps and bounds across a Grand Canyon to really get to where All Might is. And that is proven by this battle with this new Nomu, who, like, puts Endeavor through the ringer, like, almost, like, taking out his eye. While, yes, at the end of the day, he ends up winning, the panic and the chaos that surrounded this fight, where people are just kind of going, is this really the number one hero now? Because they can't help but compare Endeavor to All Might. Like, a little over 40 to 30 years have people lived under All Might's protection, of him being the ultimate hero. So to go from that to Endeavor almost, like, being one hit within his life away, it's like a night and day difference. And the weight of the situation really kind of, like, not only weighs on Endeavor, but it also weighs on the general populace, the general public, because now they realize we don't have All Might anymore, we only have Endeavor, and if Endeavor goes down, which he almost did just now, we are screwed. And it soon reveals that Hawks may not be at the number 2 spot as we thought, as he meets up with one of the League of Hero members, Dabi. But don't worry, it turns out to be a facade, because apparently Hawks is undercover with the League of Villains through the Hero Commission in hopes of bringing down the League of Villains. We'll see how well that works out very soon. This brings us to yet another exercise arc, the joint training arc. Alright, so, like, quick summary. The joint training arc is basically the classes from 1A and 1B going head to head and testing their ire. But this is also important because remember Hitoshi from the sports festival arc? Yeah, he's in the training exercise as well, to see if he can actually participate in the hero course. Because again, everyone just saw his powers, like, you know what, we should give this kid a shot, yeah. And gladly they do. Now, by looking at who's going against who, you can more or less guess who's going to win. I'm just going to point this out because he's kind of, like, all over the place, but Bakugo ends up winning his respective match. But the most notable thing to state about this arc is that Midoriya goes into a trance state.
Through the help of Shinzo, that is.
And he ends up awakening a power within One For All. And he's visited by a vestige of the previous users of this quirk. One of them being All Might's old master, but more prevalently, he's visited by this bald guy. But yeah, after that, he, like, regains control, and they continue with the exercise with no further incident. Which brings us to the Meta Liberation arc, or as some people fondly call it, the My Villain Academia arc. So in this arc, as I implied with that second name, we're focused on the League of Villains. And things aren't looking so hot with them. For one, their most valuable asset, that being Kurogori. Simply, his quirk is teleportation. It's a really powerful level of teleportation. However, he managed to be caught by Gran Torino and the local police departments. However, when he was captured, the heroes inevitably stirred something awake. But before his capture, he actually makes mention to the League of Villains that there's an asset that they can gain to help them in their goals. But we'll talk more about him very soon, actually in this arc. So with Kurogori captured, and months after they've lost All For One, the League of Villains are kind of desperate for another affiliate to help them. That's when a known organization as the Metahuman Liberation tried to smoke out the League of Villains by capturing their broker. So the League of Villains descend on a quiet little mountain pass where they meet with the thing that I told you the hero stirred up. That being Gigantomachia. Makia? Like, Ikea. And for the next month or so, Tomura Shigaraki goes head to head with this absolute unit of a character. But then the fight to defeat Giganto comes to an abrupt stop when they get a call from the Meta Liberation Army that they captured their broker, and to turn themselves in to the army for processing, to say the least. So why is the Meta Liberation Army trying to get rid of the League of Villains? Well, The whole point of the Liberation Army is to kind of get their ideals out there. Basically, their ultimate goal is to have people use their quirks freely, because right now in the established world of My Hero Academia, you are not allowed to use your quirk in public. So the Liberation Army is practically against that law. Now, in order to become more prominent, they need to snuff out the League of Villains because they're making such a big splash, so to say. So their leader, Redesto, which is play of the name of the original leader of this Liberation Army, seeks out to destroy the League of Villains. And they do that by kidnapping their broker. And once the League of Villains find this out, they quickly switch gears from fighting Giganto to figuring out this Liberation Army. But then they devise a plan to potentially kill two birds with one stone. Thus the League of Villains go into battle once again with a potential ally. I say this because they seem to keep doing this, alright? They did it with Stain, they did it with the Yakuza, and now they're doing it again with the Liberation Army. Yeah, it's just recycling ideas. Now, the fight between the League of Villains and the Liberation Army goes as well as you think. For one, the League of Villains only has a handful of members, while the Liberation Army has an army. Now, of course, during this situation, everyone within the League of Villains is put through immense stress. And as it's explained throughout My Hero Academia, when you are imbued with a quirk at the age of 4 or 5, I believe, your quirk has the ability of changing or evolving beyond what you think it is currently. I think a really good example of this is Himiko Toga, whose ability is basically the ultimate disguise. If she ingests enough blood of a certain person, she could then take up the identity of that person. However, during the Liberation Army arc, her quirk evolves. Not only can she take up the persona of a certain person, she could also use their quirk, which is something she wasn't able to do before. And she uses this to devastating effect with Uraraka's quirk. And speaking of going under immense stress, Twice is probably one of the most important, if not the second most important asset in the League of Villains, because his quirk is kind of like Himiko's, except that he can actually clone himself. He can make an army. And if he could analyze someone for long enough, he could even make clones of those other people. Now, the one thing about his quirk is, unlike Himiko's, his clones do not exhibit the exact same quirks as the people that he's copying. Proven by the fact that during this fight, when he actually manages to go face-to-face for Redesto, he manages to make his own little League of Villains. However, they don't really seem to be exhibiting any of the quirks of the people that he's copying. And not only that, but these copies are extremely weak. Like simply punching them in the face is enough for him to reduce to a pile of goo.
Nearing the conclusion of this fight, we actually get 3 chapters that dedicate itself to a flashback to Shigaraki's past, showing us how he became the way he is. The simplest way to explain it is that when his quirk awakened, he accidentally killed his entire family. Lost on the streets, however, no one would save him except for All for One.
But yeah, the League of Villains go in full charge, and the end result is that they come up on top, albeit with a few casualties. Like, Toga almost died, Twice is a little bit more insane now. Dabi is fine, actually. Oh yeah, remember when I said stress unlocks your quirk's potential? Yeah, Shigaraki got an upgrade. Now, having defeated the Meta Liberation Army, rather than going down swinging, the Liberation Army actually welcomes Shigaraki and the League of Villains. So much to the point that they are now appointed official roles within the organization. And they actually reformed to form a new organization called... give me a minute, I just need to find this. Oh no. The Paranormal Liberation Front. Oh yeah, remember Giganto? So yeah, basically what happens is while the League of Villains are fighting Giganto, they will take like these 3-hour breaks because that's how long Giganto needs to sleep before he's like up and about again. The League of Villains take the time while he's sleeping to fight the Liberation Army, and then Giganto wakes up, thanks to another character that I've failed to mention up until now. And Giganto goes charging in, but once he sees Shigaraki getting even stronger with his quirk, he bows down to him. So basically, Giganto is loyal to All for One, and he didn't like Shigaraki too much because he thinks Shigaraki is really weak. But then when Shigaraki like shows his feat of strength against the army, Giganto is like, ah, so you are my master successor. I bow my head to thee. and now joins the Paranormal Liberation Front. So yeah, within the span of a single arc, the League of Villains went from a threat to a real catastrophe. And now, having the Liberation Front by their side, along with Giganto, Shigaraki then meets up with an ally of All for One, the Doctor. And I'm just going to call him the Doctor. I know he has an actual name, but I just call him the Doctor. Anyways, the Doctor actually helped stabilize All for One after his fight with All Might about 5 years, around 6 years ago. You know, the fight that almost killed All Might and almost killed All for One. Now, the Doctor actually is able to engineer quirks into anyone, and he's the mastermind behind the Nomu themselves. Now that he's seen Shigaraki proving himself to be a worthy leader, although there is an ulterior motive to this, but we're going to find out very soon. By the way, we're almost through My Hero Academia. Oh wait, no. Shit, we're only halfway through. Fuck. So yeah, with that in mind, the Doctor takes Shigaraki in and begins a long and painful process of imbuing him with more quirks to make him a catastrophe for the modern era. Which brings us to the Endeavor Agency arc. Now this arc is very important for Endeavor, and remember how I said some of the characters will gain more development through separate arcs? Well, here we go. Now there isn't really much to say about this arc. It's basically like the previous work study arcs with Night Eye and Gran Torino. I say the only major difference is this is probably one of the shorter of the internship arcs, in that it mainly... My computer turned on again. Damn. In that it mainly focuses on Endeavor. And you know how I said, you know, the weight of being number one starts to weigh on him? Well, now he has to like face the skeletons in his closet. He has to face his family that he was abused. He has to face his wife that he locked away in a strange asylum, so on and so forth. Now I will say this, I'm really glad that Horikoshi went with the direction that he did with Endeavor's reform. Where yeah, his estranged wife is willing to give him a chance, and Todoroki is also willing to give him a chance, but they don't let the past die, more or less. They still remember what he did. And the end result is that basically how things are left off when we get closer to the end of the story is that yes, the Todoroki family ends up coming closer together, but they get closer together not because of Endeavor, but because he more or less kind of pushes them together, but at the same time, he himself isn't there. And you know, that's the one thing I really wish Horikoshi kind of showed, because I believe it's in this arc where Endeavor talks about the dream that he has, where he sees all of his family members together eating at the dinner table. The only thing is that in that dream, Endeavor's not there. He's nowhere close, and he kind of has this realization in order for that dream to become a reality, he cannot be present to his family. So yeah, as sad as it is, and I'm pretty sure a lot of people want to see Endeavor kind of have his own happy ending. The problem is his character doesn't really allow that to happen. He just does so much wrong, and with so much wrong, you can only do so much right to really atone for what you did. So the best thing you could really do is just try and do your best, or try to repair as much as you can, and have those affected to pick up the pieces themselves, rather than you trying to meld everything back together. And I will admit, there's even a part of me that kind of wished to see Endeavor get a happy ending, but at the same time, it's like you hear some of the things he did, it's like... Okay, so yeah, I'm really glad Horikoshi kind of went the direction that he ended up going with Endeavor. Oh yeah, there's this like page I ended up saving at Bakugo. Who uses a cape for stealth?
Now, before we proceed into the next arc, we should probably talk about this intermission. In these 3 chapters, we follow Eraserhead and Present Mike as they visit one of the new inmates at Tartarus, Kurogiri. They essentially have to interrogate him. However, it's soon revealed that Kurogiri isn't what he seems. He's a bioengineered person. More specifically, he's a Nomu. But more than that, the reason why Aizawa and Mike were invited specifically is that tests confirm that Kuroguri is a walking corpse of their old friend from their own time in UA. The cadaver's original name was Ouroboros Shirakumo, who sadly passed away due to falling debris caused by a villain attack. We'll talk more about that later on. Anyways, the hope is that they could potentially bring back Ouroboros, but sadly, nothing comes of this.
Which brings us to the Paranormal Liberation War. Man, sorry, I just can't take that name seriously. So, quick recap. Hawks is undercover for the League of Villains, and he's following their progress. And he actually manages to get deep enough into the organization that he knows what targets that they need to take out, and where to strike, and when to strike. And understanding that Shigaraki is going to be out of play, going through his transformation thanks to the Doctor, the heroes, using the information provided by Hawks, then devise a plan to take out the Paranormal Liberation Front. The end result would be one of the biggest hero operations probably in the history of My Hero Academia, where all notable heroes descend in on the Paranormal Liberation Front. However, this is not the final arc. And honestly, I say this arc is pretty brutal when compared to the other big battles that we've seen in My Hero Academia. Like Mirako, one of the stronger of the heroes, gets absolutely washed out by some of the Nomu in the facility. And with that, most of the heroes are also having a lot of trouble with a lot of the Liberation members. But yeah, the heroes break into multiple facilities of the Paranormal Liberation Front, and they manage to get a few people into custody. However, what makes this arc so impactful is that this kind of leads us straight into the final act of My Hero Academia. That being, when they break in, they find Shigaraki still undergoing his quirk transformation, and when they disrupt it, he seems dead. Except he's not. A newly revived and way more powerful version of Shigaraki awakens and takes out a good number of heroes, and along with that, dissolving almost an entire city in the process. Now, I will say, throughout the series, I've never really taken Shigaraki too seriously. Like, his power is definitely freaky enough. I think the way he's illustrated also gives him a bit of a presence, but it's the way that he acts that doesn't really give me a lot of urgency with him as a character. Like, when the other arcs are happening, whether it be the Overhaul arc or the Hero Killer arc, those characters themselves had enough of a presence that they kept my attention. And even though I know that maybe Shigaraki is arguably the most dangerous of them, and he even gets away from those arcs way better than the named villains of those arcs, he never really gave me any urgency to really fear him. This arc changes that. He becomes this being that becomes one-to-one with something like All for One. And I think the worst part about this is that because so many heroes were concentrated in one spot, a lot of heroes sadly were caught up in this big old rock explosion that Shigaraki kind of triggers. And, you know, his quirk has upgraded to the point where he doesn't necessarily need to touch something in order to rot it. If it's close enough to the vicinity where he puts down his hand, it will rot away. And as I said before, he almost destroys an entire city with this quirk. And because of that, a good number of heroes who are participating in what is one of the biggest hero joint operations in the history of this universe perish. Now, because Shigaraki has a bunch of quirks imbued into him, one of them being Search, he then begins hunting down Deku, because Shigaraki knows about One for All. There also seems to be some kind of mental connection between Shigaraki and All for One. And like that, Shigaraki is off, hunting down Deku, because he's the one who has One for All. Now, outside of the world-changing, killing almost most of the hero stuff, this arc is also prevalent because they reveal something quite shocking. So back in the Endeavor arc, Todoroki actually reveals that they have this other sibling who sadly passed away at a very young age, their eldest sibling, named Toya. However, it seemed that Toya met his end at a young age due to the hands of a villain named Dabi, the same Dabi that we see in the League of Villains. However, it's revealed in this arc that Toya never died. He's Dabi. And once this was revealed, Endeavor, like, you know how ever since he got into the number one spot, like, cracks are starting to form because of the overwhelming weight and pressure from everything, you know, dealing with his past, while also maintaining the responsibility of being the number one hero in the world. That Well, the cracks start becoming too much, and Endeavor more or less freezes once he finds out that Dobby is in fact Toya, to the point where he can't believe it. He's just paralyzed. And yeah, the great battle continues between the few Liberation members, all members of the League of Villains, and the few heroes that are left. Anyways, all hope seems lost when all of a sudden... I swear to God, when I saw Mamillion getting his powers back, I was... my jaw was on the floor, because I didn't think he was going to get his powers that quickly. I honestly thought that he was going to get his powers in the epilogue, and it's revealed that Eri actually manages to get Mamillion's quirk back. But to see him like going back into the fray, low-key, was pretty awesome. By the end of it, Midoriya is critically injured. Along with him, Bakugo, Todoroki, and a couple of other classmates don't really walk away unscathed. The villains lost a couple of comrades, but so did the heroes. And sadly, one of the dead heroes is Midnight, who actually taught Class 1A. They're out there, I was gonna say years, but they've only been at school for one semester. This is the second semester, so yeah, we'll talk more about that in a bit. So yeah, while Deku is in a coma in the hospital, he actually converses with the other previous holders of One for All. This is where he gets more insight for the quirk itself. It is there where he's conversing with the vestiges of those who held One for All in the past that Deku ultimately decides to leave UA. The devastation that was caused due to the Paranormal Liberation War, the era of peace that All Might managed to maintain, is shattered. This leads us to the fourth to the final arc, the Dark Hero arc. Wonder why they called it that. Where we see Deku a couple of months later, actually I think it's only been a month, and he manages to get a better handle of One for All. However, in that 1 month, he has gotten to the point where people kind of look at him and they don't really see a hero, they see something else. What is that exactly? Good question. You be the judge of that. But yeah, I do appreciate this arc because it does remove itself from the high school setting probably the most out of the other arcs. And it really does take My Hero Academia down a different direction. Before it was kind of lighthearted and fun and games, but now things have taken a darker turn. And I do understand why this arc has been really hyped up. However, in terms of what they managed to get away with, I think Horikoshi could have added a lot more. But we'll talk more about that at the end when I reveal something about this entire series. So while Deku did end up leaving UA, he's not working alone. He's actually working with some of the top heroes along with All Might. Right now, their main goal is to track down the League of Villains. However, in him doing that, the League of Villains also have a couple of tricks up their own sleeves. For one, after the previous war arc, the League of Villains then make a beeline to most of the maximum security prisons throughout the country. One of those prisons being Tartarus, where All for One is being held. And after breaking him out, everyone else breaks out. But while All for One, along with the League of Villains, are breaking everyone out, All for One then employs a couple of the villains themselves to become assassins, and those assassins attempt to hunt down Deku. Now, in this arc, we only see two. One of them is unnamed, and the other being Lady Nagata. Now, it seems that Deku does have a lid on everything. However, as time progresses, we start to see his own cracks starting to form. Deku starts not sleeping too much. He doesn't eat a lot. And it's getting to the point where he's even skimping out on meals, and in the most ultimate betrayal, he ends up leaving All Might behind. And eventually, everything starts catching up to him. Exhaustion, low energy. Eventually, he faces another assassin that he simply can't defeat, because their quirk is similar to Hitoshi's, where the assassin managed to accumulate an army of bystanders to go against Deku. However, while Deku is being overwhelmed, the class of 1A intervenes and saves him. It is there that the class of 1A manages to convince Deku to return to UA. Despite Deku's protest, he relents and retreats with him. Now, remember that veil of peace that I mentioned about? Well, the after effects of the war arc extends further and further, as when he tries to return to UA, the people there aren't very welcoming. So one thing I need to explain. So when society started to go downhill, all the hero schools opened their doors to serve as shelters. So UA is no longer a school, it is a refugee camp. And the refugees see Deku and they're like, hey yo, what the fuck? Because they know that the villains, especially Shigaraki, are going after him specifically. But Ochako, with an impassioned speech, manages to convince everyone to let Deku come in.
Not too long after that, All Might would be confronted by the hero killer Stain himself. And after giving what I assume is a pep talk, Stain would give All Might some information that he gained from his Tartarus escape. Now, what the data reveals is what I'm going to be explaining later on, involving quirks, the soul, and vestiges. And what the data reveals is how the vestige of All for One is slowly taking over Shigaraki, and that the full merger between All for One and Shigaraki would be complete within 3 days.
And it seems that the lack of rest is not just limited to the heroes, because not too long after Deku rejoins UA, Shigaraki starts to stir again, but mainly because of the approach of another hero from the United States. So yeah, basically the countries around the world are seeing Japan's situation, and apparently the situation in Japan isn't only confined to that country, but has slowly been spreading throughout the world. Anarchy, prisoners escaping, so on and so forth. So yeah, the world governments are very hesitant of sending in their best heroes to Japan, especially considering what happened in Japan, with some heroes even going against their superiors. However, there's one hero that was like, nah, that being Kathleen Bate, or Stars and Stripe. And Star and Stripe sends a shiver down All for One's back, simply because of her quirk, that being New Order. Now, what is New Order? Well, described by the wiki, New Order allows the user to set a rule onto their surroundings after touching the target and calling out their name, allowing them to manipulate and bestow new properties onto themselves and the world around them. So basically, she could just look at an empty space in front of you and go, there's a wall here, you cannot pass this point, and there will be a wall there. And she uses this ability to full effect with her fight against Shigaraki. And honestly, the fight is pretty intense to say the least, mainly because I knew how this fight was going to end. Shigaraki, who's slowly but surely starting to lose himself, is relentless against his fight against Star and Stripe. And you know what, I think it's about time I bring up the elephant in the room. So Star and Stripe, during the fight, tries to use her quirk against Shigaraki. However, as stated in the description, her quirk only works on people if she calls them by name. So when she calls out Tomura Shigaraki and gives him the order, which is simply, if Tomura Shigaraki moves even an inch, he will be killed, her quirk doesn't work. Now, why does her quirk not work on Tomura Shigaraki? Well, because Tomura Shigaraki is slowly not becoming Tomura Shigaraki. Apparently, this is All for One's plan from the get-go. He took Shigaraki off the streets, groomed him not to be a successor, but for him to be a vessel for himself. Because by this point, it's kind of stated that whenever a quirk is passed on to another person, this is an explanation that is given from All for One, that when he takes quirks, vestiges or even remnants of the person who had that quirk comes along with it, and they put up a bit of a fight, to say the least. This also kind of explains the vestiges that Deku has seen after he obtained One for All. But yeah, if you were to take a quirk from somebody, a bit of their soul seems to be intact in there. And it turns out, as the Doctor was slowly enhancing Shigaraki, he also gave Shigaraki a beta form of All for One's quirk, that being All for One. Yeah, it gets a little confusing. And it's because of that, All for One's personality is slowly but surely taking over Shigaraki. So, when Stars and Stripes says Tomura Shigaraki, when really it's All for One that she's fighting. Now, sadly, the fight goes as expected. Stars and Stripe loses. Now, I will say, it's the reason why Stars and Stripe lost the fight is because she was unwilling to sacrifice one of the pilots who was serving as a platform for Shigaraki. You saw the image, she's going in on bombers. Hopefully they don't need to fight a hyper-evolving radioactive monster sooner or later. But yeah, basically she was unwilling to sacrifice his life, and therefore left her fully open for All for One, or Tomura Shigaraki, to take advantage. However, in saying that, she does not go down easy, because remember her quirk, New Order? And you know how when quirks are passed on, a vestige of the original owner comes along with it? Well, I'm going to be real. Because I knew how this was going to go, what happens next caught me so off guard, and I couldn't help but be really damn hype about it. Because just before Shigaraki takes Stars and Stripes quirk, Stars and Stripe puts on a new order for her quirk, which is basically new order. If you find yourself with other quirks, destroy those other quirks. And what ends up happening is so cool. We see Stars and Stripes' quirk slowly destroying Shigaraki from the inside. And this isn't just him having a bit of a headache, like his body is contorting, everything's like breaking, he is like having a spaz attack in midair as Stars and Stripes' new order quirk just goes ham inside Shigaraki. Now All For One is like, oh god, oh no! Like he starts freaking out because he's starting to lose quirks by the dozen. So using Shigaraki's body, he quickly goes down, finds some poor bloke at a seaside town, takes his quirk away, and imbues him with new order. Now, where does this go? Absolutely nowhere. We never see this guy ever again with what is arguably the most powerful quirk in all of My Hero Academia. Like, anyone with that quirk can simply imbue a new order, that being, no one can take this quirk. Or, you know, if given more development, she could even be imbuing more orders, because one of the limitations of new order, at least at this point, is that she could only give 2 orders at a time. She can't give 3. However, I could easily see the evolution of this quirk being to implement even more orders, or even giving fewer details to the orders. Maybe even instead of saying one's name, all one needs to do is look at the person that they want to imbue the new order and just state it. I don't know, it's like there's so many directions that new order could go into when it comes to evolving as a quirk.
The resulting attack from Stars and Stripe on All For One and Shigaraki would delay their merger. What would originally take 3 days has now been extended to a week, giving more time for the heroes to prep their counterattack.
But yeah, Stars and Stripe, rest in peace, you were the absolute GOAT. Now this brings us to the last 2 arcs. Now I actually see these as 1 arc, but according to the wiki they're referred to as 2. That being the UA Trader arc and the final arc. Now, the UA Trader arc. So remember how throughout the series, it's kind of weird how the League of Villains know exactly where Class 1A is going to be? Well, we finally find out who the hell this mole is. And it's none other than Aoyame. Or you could call him by his hero name, Can't Stop Twinkling. Anyway, yes, it was him that led the League of Villains to both the training exercise in the initial arc, the one where All Might went toe-to-toe with the first Nomu, and he's also responsible of informing the location of the training camp. I think one of the most painful things about this reveal is that when the teachers of UA were suspecting a mole in their midst, they immediately dismissed all the kids, every single one of them, and they said something along the lines of, I can't really see these kids doing any wrong alongside us. Both the teachers and students of UA find out. Now the reason why Aoyame was the mole to begin with is because he was born quirkless like Deku, and his parents, wanting him to have a normal childhood and not be picked on for being quirkless, again referred to Deku for that, they decided to confront All For One and ask if they could imbue their boy with a quirk. He obliges, but of course, when they did that, they're now in his debt. And how do they repay his debt? Well, when he orders them to spy on UA. So yeah, I'm really glad that we finally figured out who the traitor was, because there were multiple points within the series where that was just at the back of my mind. You know, how did the League of Villains find these locations that UA tried so hard to keep secret? Who exactly is leaking information to the League of Villains? And we finally got the answer. And you know, I'm not too overwhelmed, nor am I underwhelmed by the reveal. I can't help but think that Horikoshi was kind of forced to revisit that. It's like, oh yeah, I did that. Shit. And he kind of made Aoyama the leak. But I'm at least glad that the question has been answered, because that was something that was genuinely bothering me ever since significance of a mole potentially being within UA was presented. So how did the heroes utilize this information? Now that Shigaraki needs way more time to heal after his bout with Stars and Stripes, Because before, it was like he had a few days before he was going to come back and hunt down for Deku. But now, because of Stars and Stripes' quirk almost literally tearing his body apart, he would be out of commission for a bit longer. So they take the time to strategize, and using the information that they have, to lure All For One and the League of Villains out into the open. And for the first time, have the villains fight on the heroes' terms. So Aoyame, visiting with Deku, finally decide to converse, ever since the reveal of his treachery. But then, oh my god, he backstabbed him again! Oh no! Except, it was a double cross. Because after learning about the betrayal, Yue quickly starts to make a strategy. However, there is one problem. All For One has a quirk that allows him to detect if someone is lying to him or has ill intentions towards him. So even if Aoyame or his parents were to set up a meeting with All For One, he would instantly know when they're up to something. So how do they get around that? Well, remember Hitoshi? Yeah, they get Hitoshi to brainwash Aoyame's parents and have them converse with All For One to set up a meeting. And because they're brainwashed, they don't have any real intentions. They don't have any ill intentions, they don't have any afterthought, so All For One cannot pick up on the conversation that he's having with Aoyame's parents is actually a booby trap. As soon as I saw that, I was like, yo, let's go! Because yeah, it definitely feels like for a large part of the series, the heroes seem to be on the losing side when it comes to these battles. So to finally see them like get such a to have such a move being played on the villains, it was like it really felt like Stars and Stripes using her quirk all over again. And this immediately takes us to the final arc of My Hero Academia. That's simply being called the Final Wars arc. Hey, wait a minute. So, when All For One shows up with the League of Villains, the heroes, using their own portal quirk, come in all Avengers style and literally push the villains back into their own arenas. Shigaraki is transported to a floating arena
and has to fight against Bakugo, Best Genius, Mirako, Sun Eater, Edgeshot, Hado, and the entire structure would be kept up and maintained by the support department, with support from Aizawa and Monoma. And speaking of Monoma,
basically this guy is a shitlord of Class 1B. Like every time he shows up, he's like, oh, what's this? Class 1A? He's just falling behind. Whoa, hey, whoa. Now his quirk is that he can copy quirks, and through that he managed to copy the quirk of the now captured Kurogiri, and soon after that he copies Eraser's Head's quirk to prevent Shigaraki from using his decay. But yeah, it's like, it's nice to see him actually having a prevalent role in this pivotal arc. Also, there's this BS about Shigaraki being able to grow so many fingers and hands. No, that's not normal. I don't care what kind of explanation you try to make. No. So yeah, you have that fight going on. You have Himiko Toga work to an aquarium island with Uraraka and Froppy. And then we have Endeavor with Todoroki facing off against All For One and Dabi, along with their respective armies. But anyways, Deku is supposed to be with them fighting Tomoru Shigaraki. However, Deku gets accidentally tug-pulled to another location with Toga. So yeah, to say that a lot happens in this fight is the understatement of the century. Let me see if I could run through this real quick. So Midoriya quickly separates himself from the aquarium because he's not supposed to be there. He's supposed to be fighting Shigaraki. So he's racing against time. Meanwhile, with the Shigaraki fight, even without his decay quirk, he manages to beat the absolute crap out of everyone. Even the big three aren't able to keep up with him. Now that brings us to Endeavor versus All For One. Endeavor goes all out. He does not give All For One too much space to breathe even. However, All For One has a trick up his sleeve, that being, remember the quirk erasing bullets? Well, there's a bit of a secondary effect to that, that simply being the regression thanks to Ares' quirk. So anyways, Endeavor scorches All For One to the point where he should be dead. He should be. But because All For One hits himself with the quirk erasing bullet, which also has the after effect that he can regress back in time, so as he continues fighting, he gets younger and younger. All For One manages to regress to a point where he can remove himself from the fight. But of course, everyone tries to dogpile him. Basically, All For One wants to get himself back on Tomoru Shigaraki's side. That way he can try and complete the merger. Back with the Shigaraki fight, things are looking good at all, as Shigaraki lands a decisive blow on Bakugo, practically killing him. And desperate to try and save him, both Edshot and Best Genius try to suture his wounds and try to bring him back to life. However, the caveat is Edshot, every time they reduce themselves down to size, and in the case of this moment, suture thread, their lifespan gets heavily depleted. We'll talk more about that in a bit. But yeah, as things are looking bleak, as All Might is fighting All For One, and Bakugo is, flatlined, Deku finally manages to appear and fights Tomoru Shigaraki. Now Deku is determined to save Tomoru from this path of destruction, because when Midoriya kind of went into Shigaraki's vistage, more or less, you saw Shigaraki in the past, just being the scared little kid who just misunderstood the quirk that he gained, which we need to talk about that too, before sadly killing his entire family. So Deku going into the fight, he's determined to try and save Shigaraki from All For One. Despite the ultimate goal for Shigaraki, bestowed upon him by All For One, is for Shigaraki to become All For One's next vessel. However, Shigaraki fights back, and he kind of has this dual personality going on, where sometimes it's All For One, but every now and then maybe something is stated, maybe there's a word, conversation, or something that just triggers Shigaraki, and then Shigaraki's back in the pilot seat. So yeah, there's this kind of back and forth between Shigaraki and All For One, while he's battling everyone else that's trying to stop him. And Dabi, it's revealed that his quirk, while Dabi has the power of fire, he has a secondary quirk, that being that he can withstand extremely low temperatures. This is kind of the unfortunate thing about having these kind of quirk marriages, because you might end up having a combination of quirks that aren't really compatible with each other. Because yeah, he's resistant to very low temperatures. Not exactly good with a guy who has fire powers. So every time he uses his fire powers, he slowly starts to degenerate. And by that I mean his flesh, his skin literally starts burning away. So yeah, the battle between the Todorokis ends up being really intense. And the fight ultimately ends when the entire Todoroki family comes together to stop Dabi.
Meanwhile, with All For One, as he makes a beeline for Tomoru.
But of course, there was a certain hero that ends up being in his way that prevents him from fully realizing that. Yeah, All Might and All For One have one more battle. However, things don't really fare in All Might's case. Anyways, the battle with Uraraka Froppy against Himiko continues, but the battle comes ahead when Himiko uses the blood twice and brings on Sad Man Parade. And this is where the turning point of all three battles kind of happens. Because while this is happening, another faction of the League of Villains are going after Korigiri to try and use his quirk again. And Spinner actually manages to succeed with great difficulty. It is also during this that we got a backstory to Tentacalo, that's what his name was? Kawagiri, who's fighting these two personas, his Nomu persona and his original persona, ultimately opens portals between the three fights, and the amount of twices go through those portals and start disrupting those fights as well.
And the disruption from the twice was more than enough for the fortress that Shigaraki and Deku are currently fighting on to fall out of the sky. However, in this final hour, General Criminal shows up and using his quirk manages to slow the descent of the fortress. I told you they'd come in clutch.
And then Toga lands a near fatal blow to Ochako with her knife, and Ochako almost bleeds out. But then, as they continue to have this conversation, Ochako actually manages to break through to Toga. However, because Ochako is bleeding out, Toga decides to save her by using a blood transfusion, by sucking some of it's kind of ironic. In order to save Uraraka, Toga needs to drink some of her blood so she could turn into Ochako, so she could give her a blood transfusion and give her more blood. Yeah, so that happens, but sadly Toga perishes during this transaction. So yeah, it's after Himiko died that the other choices just disappear, and that ends up being resolved. Now going back to All for One, yeah, this part of the battle kind of proves that as much as he's a man with a plan and you know he has this ultimate goal, he still has a level of resentment and spite specifically catered towards All Might, and is willing to forego the plan to just teach this old man one more lesson. So yeah, All Might manages to injure All for One to the point where he's regressing even further.
with some assistance from Stain, albeit with a price.
And then it's a revived Bakugo that actually manages to land the finishing blow. And this is where things kind of get weird, because we then are given another flashback to the past of All for One and the origins of One for All. So apparently, remember how I said about 100 or so years ago, the first baby to exhibit a quirk popped up? Well, it turns out that that baby technically wasn't the first. It was actually One for All who was the first person to have a quirk. The thing is, like, his mom was on the streets, gave birth to the babies, but in the process of giving birth, she passed away, and One for All, as a baby, was, like, apparently he was conscious enough to take action. And you know, there's something about the image of this baby feeding on his mother is kind of disturbing, low-key. But wait, there's more, because it turns out it's not actually All for One who was the first to have a quirk, it was actually his mother. So who here exactly is the first? Is it the glowing baby, is it All for One, or is it All for One's mother? I don't know. So yeah, anyway, we just kind of get a quick little story of All for One as he's growing up. There isn't really a lot to really write home about this origin story, because everything is pretty much what we've seen or heard throughout the story itself. So it kind of brings up the question, what exactly was the point of this flashback? And on top of that, why have this flashback now during the final battle, when this flashback could literally be placed anywhere else in the series? You know, just implement that in. It's like, that's the one shonen trope I really hate. It's like, big important battle, flashback time. Fuck. And it's kind of funny, because every time All for One gets hit, he slowly starts regressing further and further back in time due to the erase quirk bullets. And like these panels, I can't help but imagine him just screaming, just oh god, and he just pops out of existence. Like oh man, that's wild. But also it's so funny to me. I'm sorry. When the big bad regresses so much, he turns into a baby, and it really looked like Bakugo was about to just roast this kid alive. It's why. So with All for One sorted out, with Dabi subdued, with Toga sadly passed away, and the other members of the League of Villains and the Paranormal Society having been captured by the other heroes, it's down to Shigaraki and Deku to figure out who's going to win this fight. And you know, as the battle continues, Midoriya then comes up with an idea to simply give All for One what he wants, that being One for All. So Deku allows one of the vestiges to go and check things out before sending in the other vestiges of the other users of All for One into Tomura Shigaraki. And then this leads us to basically Deku going into Shigaraki's Mind Palace, where we see a young vestige of Tomura Shigaraki who's being confronted by his dad, and actually managing to break through to Shigaraki, is trying to resolve this situation. However, in him doing that, and Shigaraki showing this moment of weakness, the remnant vestige of All for One suddenly reawakens and swallows Shigaraki whole. Like now, because Deku managed to break through to Shigaraki and weaken him to a point, the part of All for One that was living inside of Shigaraki's subconscious suddenly springs awake and manages to grab control of Shigaraki's body. However, All for One, now possessing One for All, finally gets his wish. As All for One finally manages to get his brother back, the original holder for One for All, the One for All quirk starts to dissipate. So it's been mentioned that the One for All quirk is a quirk that could only be passed down to those who are quirkless at the point that it's at. So Midoriya is confirmed to be the last holder of One for All, simply because after this point, the amount of people that will be born without quirks is practically going to be zero. At this point, everyone is going to have a quirk, and if someone else were to get the One for All quirk, it would be too strong for them, and they could potentially, explode. So with that in mind, Midoriya still gives One for All to Shigaraki in hopes that he'll come back to it. But yeah, sadly, the quirk fizzles out, and this leaves One for All in a vulnerable state himself, like how Midoriya put Shigaraki in a vulnerable state, allowing All for One to take control again. But now the roles have been reversed. Now Shigaraki, bursting out of the shadows of his own subconscious, with the aid of with all the other One for All users, going at One for All, and it's ultimately that wins the battle, and that ultimately marks the end of One for All for One, and Tomura Shigaraki. The chapters between 424 and 430 is basically an epilogue. We see the aftermath of this immense battle playing out. And also, it's funny because the nations of the other world, you remember how I said they were hesitant about sending anyone in? Well, after Stars and Stripes was killed by Tomura Shigaraki, the world leaders are like, okay, yeah, no, we're not sending our best heroes in there, into that meat grinder. No way. But yeah, when the Japanese heroes decide to step up and fight against Tomura Shigaraki and the other forces, only then are the world leaders are like, okay, send everyone in. We need to help these guys when the battle is practically wrapped up by that point. Like, dude, you're not gonna make it in time. So yeah, we see Deku, who, he doesn't have the full powers of One for All, but he still has the Embers, pretty much like late stage All Might. And I will say, that is a nice little chapter, just seeing all these, just seeing the end result of everything that we've been seeing for the past 400 or so chapters. However, I can't help but feel that the ending is a little unconsequential. Like, there are moments where, like, we see people getting absolutely eviscerated, being blown up. Deku lost his arms, but it seems that everything just kind of gets tied up in a nice bone tie. I just wish there was a little bit more consequence to the actions that some of the characters made.
It's here where we actually see Edgeshot, who's not only seemingly doing better than what was foreshadowed, but is slowly and surely regenerating from his stunt trying to revive Bakugo, eating away at his life my ass.
Now, I will say, my favorite thing about these few final chapters is that one of the things about Tomura Shigaraki's origin is that no one helped him after he accidentally murdered his entire family with his decay quirk. Which, by the way, I need to point that out. So apparently, Tomura Shigaraki was a plant from All for One. Basically, All for One met up with Shigaraki's dad, asking him about his kid, and then proceeded to disguise himself as someone else and gave Tomura Shigaraki his decay quirk. And then later, that same day after he gave him that decay quirk, the quirk awakens and kills everybody in his family. I did not like that detail at all. It kind of shows All for One being this tactician that, lies in wait and, puts everything in the right place. But it felt so forced. I think it would have been way better if they just kept it that Shigaraki got this quirk and he accidentally activated it. Because, again, it doesn't really add anything. Because I think everything that was built up already, without that detail, was already placed pretty perfectly. It already made All for One seem like this character who thinks 10 steps ahead of everyone else. So I see absolutely no reason to add that detail in, that it was All for One that gave Shigaraki his decay quirk, rather than Shigaraki accidentally, awakening his quirk and accidentally killing his family. Like, the detail of All for One giving him the quirk just doesn't add anything of merit, anything new. And of course there's going to be the argument of, oh, but it's through that reveal that Shigaraki realizes that it was All for One that took away everything. But at the same time, I think All for One taking away Shigaraki's autonomy is more than enough for Shigaraki to fight against All for One. And then you could still have the redemption of Deku saving Shigaraki from all of this, pretty much.
Okay, so after thinking about it a bit longer, I will agree that this is something that All for One would do to get back at Nana Shimura, corrupting her legacy and damning her memory. However, I still stand by with what I said. Shigaraki having an aberrant quirk, which is what was believed initially and would continue to be teased with something else that we'll be talking about very soon, could have still worked with the narrative in My Hero, mainly concerning legacy or passing the torch. You have Deku trying to be the next symbol of peace while Shigaraki decides to forget the legacy of Nana Shimura, or at least that's where I stand with all of this pretty much.
And like talking about Shigaraki's origin again, so one of the things is after he murdered his parents, people wouldn't help him. Like there was even an old lady on the street is like, "Hey, little boy, are you okay?" And as soon as she saw him, she was like, "Oh shit, oh!" And instead of helping him, hoped that someone else would help him. And sadly, someone did help him. That being All for One, except for the whole shenanigans. And then when we return to the present, we get this really weird POV of this character that just kind of stumbles out. And, we see it, and then we cut away, but then we return to it. And, this kid has basically, this kid is kind of like Tomoru Shigaraki, where he developed a quirk that is an aberration of his family when compared to his family's history, kind of like Shigaraki, as implied before. All for One and Horikoshi retcon that. But anyways, he's like wandering around, and it's very clear what path this kid is going to go down on. But then we see the same grandma that ignored Shigaraki, and then she kind of realizes, I wonder whatever happened to that kid. And rather than repeating the same mistake again, she reaches a hand out to this random kid. And that's what I really like. I really like how we do see this active change in not only the characters but the world of My Hero Academia, because like going back to the beginning, we see that people view hero and villain fights as a spectacle. They don't really feel like their life is in danger because of the presence of not only these heroes but also All Might. However, as the series progresses, after All Might's retirement, we kind of see that illusion of safety collapse. And now all of a sudden people are like way more prone to panicking and not really taking risks when a battle happens. Like before it was super casual, but now they are treating it like a genuine disaster. And then that brings us to now where the aftermath of everything, when the dust settled and they realized that, oh wait a minute, these villains are people that came from somewhere. I wonder how they ended up the way they are. And rather than taking that risk again of potentially birthing another Tomoru Shigaraki, this grandma extends a hand, learning from their mistakes from the past, and rather than hoping for the best for them, actually providing something to them at the moment. So yeah, I honestly really enjoyed that part of the manga. And this is where we are revealed how long this entire series takes. Alright, from chapter 1 all the way to now. How many years does the whole story of My Hero Academia take place in? 1 year in this school program where we learn how people in this world become superheroes through an education system. We only spend 1 year in it. I'm sorry, it's like I was expecting, like this kind of goes back to what I said about how the world of My Hero Academia is as deep as any ocean, and yet the series only gives us a teaspoon level viewpoint into that world. And I think it's further proven by the fact that this whole series only takes place within the first year of the students going to it. And then after that, everything just full on time skip. Alright, we go through years 2 and 3, we see the students graduating from UA, and then we immediately jump to 8 years later. But yeah, that brings us to chapter 430, which is basically the time skip where we see everyone doing what they're doing. Where we see an adult Deku, where we discover that Deku has become a teacher. He's teaching the next generation of heroes. One of his students ends up actually being Koda, who he saved in the camp arc. And yeah, he pretty much gives some words of wisdom to this kid whose quirk isn't all too powerful, or so it seems. And yeah, pretty much says the exact same thing that All Might said to him all those years ago. And by all those years, I think 8 to 10 years ago. That being that you can be a hero. Pretty much the same thing that the grandma did, the same thing that All Might did, extending a hand to help rather than discourage. And the other kids from that class taking up the mantle of heroes themselves. And then we have this nice splash art of all the students from 1A leaping out in their hero costumes, ready to take on the next threat. And that is My Hero Academia. Is what I would say if there weren't 2 more chapters. Okay, so after the ending of My Hero Academia, there were a total of 4 chapters that released. 2 of them are promotional chapters for the movie that was coming out at the time, and then you had 2 more follow-up chapters. So chapter 431 is the definitive end of My Hero Academia, while 432 is an extra add-on. So with 431, this is the one where we catch up with the students of 1A. They're grown-ups now, and they gather around to celebrate Todoroki's promotion of becoming the number 2 hero of Japan. We also see that Deku is kind of faring well being quirkless. He actually has an exosuit, kind of like the one All Might used against All For One. And nothing really happens in this chapter. It's basically us catching up with the characters and the characters catching up with themselves. And it ends with Ochako being pushed by the vestige of Toga to Deku. It's like, go get him, Tiger! I don't know, there's something funny about Toga haunting Ochako because they had a blood transfusion. Like, I donate blood. Is there just a vestige of me haunting every person that has gotten my blood? Oh yeah, and I'm just gonna mention this because when I was telling my sister I was doing this, and I said, oh, it looks like a ghost girl pushed one of the main female characters, and she just looked at me like, what, push her off a bridge? Which brings us to the true final chapter, that being chapter 432, which is a small mini chapter showcasing Eri, who's grown up and seems to be doing way better than in the overall arc. But yeah, it's kind of funny because, you know, we see that the natural progression for a lot of these characters is to become heroes, and Eri, instead of like walking that same path, decides to become a musician. Which, you know, I will say, cool, yeah, I think that's great, but at the same time, with a quirk like that, like, no, seriously, she could easily turn the tide of any battle if she really wants to, but more power to her. So what do I think about My Hero? After I read the last chapter, what did I walk away with? I think it's good. So I say that haphazardly, but no, I do generally think it's good. I think some of the moments that they present are genuinely heartwarming or genuinely exciting, which we'll talk about in a bit, but yeah, I honestly really do enjoy My Hero Academia. However, that isn't to say that I don't have my grievances with it. Now, as you could tell from my reactions of this series, there are definitely parts that I really like, and there are parts that I don't like. And, you know, I really like talking about the world of My Hero Academia. I'm really talking about how things are organized. One thing I really do want to point out has to be the characters. So many characters in this series. So yeah, in the main series, when Izuku goes to the school, which, you know, hence My Hero Academia, I should probably have mentioned that part. I should probably mention that. It took me like 2 weeks to read this entire manga, and then some. We'll talk about the and then some later. But yeah, when I talk about the characters, I'm kind of surprised as to how little we're really given. Because given how so many people kind of hype up these characters, they really hold them close to their chests. I think a really good example of this is the shipping culture around it, but I'm not going to poke that hornet's nest. It's through that kind of culture and seeing how people react to some of these characters. I honestly thought I was going to get more out of those characters when going into the series, but honestly, I can't say I did, which was very surprising to me. Again, like, talking about how people like perceive some of these characters. And we're not talking about the big shots like Deku, Bakugo, All Might, all that. I'm talking mainly about the quote-unquote side characters. I use side characters in air quotes because they don't feel like side characters to me. I'm talking about the other classmates of 1A pretty much. Like outside of Deku and Uraraka and also Bakugo, everyone else is just kind of a blank face to me, which is which is so sad to say because each character has like really wonderful designs, great personalities, and they have great powers in of themselves. Like there's Ida, who's maybe I'm not giving them enough credit, but just hear me out on this. They don't really explore the characters a lot, and as the series progresses, the cast of characters even grows beyond 1A. But basically, when they like start to expand the cast, even those characters don't really bring too much to the table. I'd say out of almost 20 whole characters, close to 30 even, there's only like a handful of characters that you could really latch onto. And yeah, I just find that surprising, especially given how, with some of these characters, like Uraraka, for example, where she does get the appropriate development, and then you do kind of gain some sympathy for her. I was expecting that more for the other characters. There are moments where Horikoshi will set up a character, and by setup I mean, give him a little bit of development, and then put him on the right path to have further development later on. And then we never return to that character ever again. And, it is a shame because, like I said, some of these characters are very colorful. They're very unique when compared to other shonen not only other shonen characters, but even other superhero characters. It is a shame where we just don't really see too much development beyond that. And this is a problem that kind of plagues the entire series. As I said before, we have this setup of these amazing characters, but they don't really go anywhere. It feels like Horikoshi sets these things up, but he doesn't really develop them any further. So, it would have been nice if we got something a little bit more solid. And that isn't to say he should spoon feed us. It's just he kind of does it once, tells us about this character, and then never again. Go, let's talk about Midoriya, who's, I swear to God, this kid's, secret quirk is, crying, pretty much. I cannot really get behind Midoriya as a main character, as someone that I could really latch onto. And, I think this kind of shows, one of the major strengths of My Hero Academia is not its characters, but rather its world building. I definitely think what Horikoshi is kind of teasing is very interesting. It's just the unfortunate thing is the characters that we kind of need to follow to see that world. And not only that, but even when we are presented with even more interesting characters, we don't really spend a lot of time with them to really both appreciate them and the world itself. And to have an analog like Deku, who's powerless. For one, I kind of understand because in our normal society, we don't have superhumans, so I guess the idea is by making Deku quirkless, we are kind of in his shoes. The only problem with that is Deku has certain quirks about him that kind of removes him from the audience a bit. There is nothing like this present in our world, so of course I'm just very curious as to the world of My Hero Academia and the history of My Hero Academia. So I really want to learn about that specifically. But yeah, it just really does feel like the point of view that we end up getting in the My Hero Academia manga is not as deep or detailed as I was expecting. And, talking about some of the characters, we have so many characters in 1A, and then we're introducing more characters with 1B. However, the amount of development that each one of those characters gains is very, very limited. And I feel like a lot of the carrying power for these characters is mainly through the fandom itself. Of all the students in 1A, how many other characters did I refer to by name? Because, really think about it. How many times have I mentioned any other character by name outside of Deku or Bakugo or Todoroki or Ochako. Not that many. They didn't really leave much of an impact on me as a reader. Now, if we want to talk about a character that has major appeal, it has to be Todoroki. So yeah, it's like through Todoroki's story where I genuinely had some interest in that. I think Todoroki's story is kind of the pivotal example of what Horikoshi was trying to do, or what he should have been doing, which was establishing this character near the beginning, and then throughout the series, develop him a little bit more, and then giving him another arc committed to him. And yeah, it truly is great to see that kind of growth, and to see Todoroki just it's like, again, he's like the main character, and I just really wish that we kind of got that level of development with the other characters. And it's kind of funny how My Hero Academia is like this mainline series. However, given everything that we're showing, it's kind of a teaspoon deep, to say the least. Another thing that I kind of find annoying about My Hero Academia is the reuse of certain tropes. Like, I think a good example of this is when Midoriya signs up with Night Eye for his agency. And because he didn't manage to make Night Eye laugh, Night Eye challenges Midoriya to try and catch him, to get his stamp, so Midoriya could stamp the approval letter so he could participate in the work study. Here's my problem with that, though. We saw this already with Gran Torino chapters earlier during the Stain arc. I just can't help but think of how else Horikoshi can really expand beyond just using the same tropes, because I think another thing that also occurs are tournament arcs. You have the initial tournament arc where we see the classmates going through Olympic style games or contests, battles pretty much, to kind of show their skills and whatnot. But then we get something similar midway when later on in the story, actually not too long after that arc, like I think even in season 3, the sports festival was in season 2, and what I'm about to talk about is in season 3, is when they were getting their hero licenses, where they have to participate in an Olympic style array of challenges to get their license. And it's constantly going back to the same tropes really kind of shows how limiting it is, the scope of this story. And with that in mind, we should probably talk about the academia part in My Hero Academia. It's another high school set shonen, and here's my problem with shonen stories taking place in a high school setting. When you do that, you really limit yourself to what you can expose both your characters and the audience to. Because again, if you're going to set it in a high school setting, then you need to have the character you follow being either a teacher or a student. And the problem with that is their scope is so limited to the setting that you provided. And I think throughout this series is a perfect example of that, up until the final arc, that is. Pretty much every event that we see happen in the series is connected back to the school. The Stain arc happens because all the students are going to their work studies with these superhero agencies, and through the program that this school sets up, that's how these kids manage to get into these situations. When it comes to the tournament style events, whether it be the UA games, which for some reason replace the Olympics, which I think is so funny, again, set up by the school. There's so many more interesting ways they could go about some of these ideas. Like, for example, the UA games. They could have easily made it into a school competition, like Skills Canada, for example, where you get kids from different schools competing in this contest, and testing their quirks and whatnot. And it also doesn't help that that the tournament arc happens right after the entrance arc, which there's so many things just happening all over again, just repeating. And again, it just feels like what this world can establish is so much more than what is being provided through Horikoshi's writing. And this kind of brings me to one of my complaints about My Hero Academia, where it feels like Horikoshi, like, he has a really good idea. He has this wonderful world that is brimming with possibility. However, it feels like they're stuck with, the basic shonen tropes, and he can't really escape from that and explore other means of exploring this world. I think, like, if anything, one thing they could have done is, I don't know, like, do a written test. But, that's just me. It's just, too much of the same thing with not much consequence coming from this, and moving on to something else that is also pretty much the same thing. And, talking about tropes that don't exactly work well, My Hero Academia kind of falls into the same pitfall traps that other shonen series kind of fall into. I think a really good example of this is something pivotal is about to happen, and then flashback. This doesn't happen a lot in My Hero, but the one time it did was super annoying, and that was during the final battle where Horikoshi finally decided, hey guys, what if we talk about All for One's origin? Huh? You down? And yeah, no, just don't do that. I think there were so many better places they could have put those two chapters. Like, don't get me wrong, I think it's very compelling to actually see the start of All for One and his brother, who ends up getting the quirk One for All. My only problem is where it's placed. I think there's just a way better way of building up that villain, and yeah. At the end of the day, that flashback only managed to do one thing, and that was explaining how All for One had this, like, one extra hand during Shigaraki's flashback. But yeah, it's it is a shame that that's kind of how that story went. And yeah, I don't want to say My Hero Academia is overhyped, but I definitely think a lot of the excitement, at least surrounding some of its characters, is a bit overblown. Like, at the end of the day, I think My Hero Academia is a pretty good story, and I'm glad that I've managed to check it out in full with the manga. However, I think, like, my animosity towards the series, actually wait, is animosity the word that I'm looking for? Strong hostility. Yeah, I guess so. I think the reason why I have animosity towards My Hero Academia is because, remember how I said I had a friend that was egging me on to check out the series? Well, he said that there's another series that I should check out before I start reading My Hero Academia. That being the spin-off prequel, sort of unofficial series dubbed changed my jams for this. My Vigilantes Academia, no, that's not what it's called, is an unofficial, yet official, not canon, but kind of canon, prequel spin-off series of My Hero Academia. Now, when I say I have animosity towards My Hero Academia, it's mainly towards how Horikoshi kind of presents the world and how we investigate that world. And it's through the means that Horikoshi kind of went with that kind of makes the world seem a lot deeper, yet all we see is just a shallow bit of it. But I can't say I have that same problem with My Hero Vigilantes, because at the end of the day, Vigilantes is kind of what I expected My Hero Academia to be. You have a full roster of characters, each one of them having their own fair bit of development, and despite most of the characters that we follow having other obligations, mainly with school, like the main character is attending college, and one of the secondary characters is attending high school, and yet surprisingly enough, we don't really spend a lot of time in the school setting, despite the overabundance of characters that need to go to school. So what exactly does Vigilantes have going for it, opposed to My Hero Academia? Well, at the start of the series, we are introduced to a college freshman by the name of Koichi Himawari. In the small district of Tokyo that he frequents, he takes up the vestige of the vigilante known as Nice Guy. So vigilantes in My Hero Academia are unfairly locked in with villains pretty much, simply because they're breaking the one law, therefore bad. And in the case of Koichi and the other characters that we'll be seeing in this series, that's kind of the case. The only crime that they're committing is that they are practicing their quirks in public without a hero's license, which would grant them access to allow them to use their quirks in public spaces. But because they don't, illegal. Anyways, Koichi would run into a street pop star named Popstep. But soon enough, the two of them end up getting into trouble when a small gang who Koichi bumped into earlier, and they cornered him at his job, and now they're back again, but this time they find Popstep. We're about to do some really, really heinous things to Popstep. I'm not even gonna put up the text here, like, good lord. But then Popstep, Koichi, and the gang would be met with the third vigilante in this soon-to-be trio, Knuckle Duster. Anyways, after Knuckle Duster absolutely wipes the floor with the gang of thugs, he then proceeds to forcefully bring in Koichi as his apprentice. And what I really like about this is that this is pretty much like a perfect reflection while also being a total reversal of the first chapter in My Hero Academia, where it's Midoriya, the apprentice, who approaches All Might, the master, and asks him to train him, to make him a hero. Here is the exact opposite, and Koichi, unlike Midoriya, is very adamant of not joining Knuckle Duster. Like, he just sees this guy like fall into a pile of trash and then proceeds to beat up 3 other thugs and seemingly not using his quirk. Anyways, it would be this fateful meeting between Popstep, Koichi, and Knuckle Duster that the 3 of them become the vigilantes of Naruhara. I think that's what it's called. Pretty much throughout this first arc, we see the 3 of them just kind of going around town and interacting with the locals. And that's one of the really cool things about vigilantes is, in spite of what Horikoshi says about the series, it really does play itself really well as being a prequel and a spin-off, a expansion to My Hero Academia, as throughout the series we actually encounter characters that we see in the mainline My Hero Academia series. One notable example of this has to be Aizawa, or Eraserhead, aka the teacher of Class 1A. So yeah, throughout the first arc of this series, we just kind of see Knuckle Duster going around taking out certain quirk users, because he's hunting down someone in the streets who's distributing an illegal drug called Trigger. Now what Trigger does, it pretty much acts as a upgrade to your quirk. So you just stick the needle in, and then boom, suddenly your quirk is like 5 times stronger than what it was before.
There's a really good example of this in the mainline My Hero Academia series, where during the overall arc, Fat Gum, Sun Eater, and Kirishima manage to corner a thug before he injects himself with a drug that enhances his quirk.
However, the effects of it is minimal. For now. When they actually manage to corner one of the distributors of Trigger, he injects himself and then turns into a colossal kaiju looking thing. So anyways, as the trio continues with their shenanigans, Koichi, whose vigilante name was Nice Guy at the time, then decides to take up the monicum of the Crawler. However, a lot of people didn't get the memo, and they keep calling him the Curler. Which, given the way how he moves around with his quirk, I kind of see why they would think that. So I say the one who sticks out the most in this trio has to be Popstep, because given her personality, it really does seem like she's kind of forcing herself to stay with these 2 guys. But then, by the end of the arc, we actually learn why she continues to stick around with Koichi and Knuckle Duster. Well, first of all, Koichi has no choice with Knuckle Duster. Like, he insists on being Koichi's master, or he insists that Koichi be his apprentice. Popstep is mainly following Koichi, because it's revealed that years before their initial meetup in the manga itself, that Popstep, as a kid, was drowning in the river, and Koichi, who was making his way to a hero's test, decided to jump in and save her. So that's why Popstep continues to follow Koichi and Knuckle Duster. It's because she has both an appreciation, but also a bit of a crush on Koichi. Now with that, we go into the next arc, that being the Stendale arc. Now this arc, despite how short it is It's very impactful because being a prequel series, Vigilantes does a really good job at setting up the origins of a lot of elements that we see in My Hero Academia. We will see the early stages of the Nomu through the trigger drug being distributed on the streets. We also have a character who's directly tied into One For All. And as I mentioned Aizawa, we also see other characters who appear in the mainline series showing up in the prequel series. But the Stendale arc is very important because in this arc, we actually see the hero killer Stain himself before he becomes the hero killer. Now in this arc actually, he isn't going after heroes, instead he's actually going after villains. You know, it's just the same mindset as before but applying it to the villains. And sadly enough, when this arc ultimately ends with Knuckle Duster and Stendhal, again I have no idea how it's pronounced, it is their fateful confrontation that actually sends Stendale over the edge and has him adopt this new philosophy when it comes to heroes. Thus, we are seeing the birth of the hero killer Stain himself because of the characters from Vigilantes. And then we have the Senpai arc. Wait a minute. In this arc, we actually meet up with an older student from Koichi's college, Makoto Tsukachi, I think? Yeah, I'm probably not pronouncing that right. Who's actually the sister of Detective Takashi that we see in the mainline series. Again, the connections between Vigilantes and Academia, there's so many connections between the two. Oh yeah, so I should probably mention that All Might is meeting up with Makoto's brother, and Makoto's brother, who's the detective we see throughout My Hero Academia, learns about All Might's secret because of this funny little side chapter that we see where All Might needs to, like, he's trying to have a conversation with Makoto's brother, but then something happens, like, oh, a carjacking, oh, a cat stuck in a tree, oh no, a giant robot is attacking. So every time he tries to, like, sit down with this guy, he's like, oh, sorry, I need to go, it's bathroom problems. He goes, turns into All Might, stops the crime that's happening, and then gets back, but he does it so much that he forgets to do certain things, and then Makoto's brother, being a detective, like, puts two and two together. It's like, you know, All Might. Anyways, there's one thing I really appreciate about this arc because while it does focus on Koichi and Makoto learning a bit about hero history, I am so glad that we actually do learn about the hero history. Now, sure, the way that it's being presented doesn't seem optimal because, you know, show don't tell. But I think it actually really makes a lot of sense. I think it's great that with this college setting that Koichi and Makoto are in, and you know, Koichi is asking Makoto for help because he's like falling behind because he's playing vigilante by night and being a normal college student by day, and you know, just finding the balances. I mean, you've read superhero comics, right? So yeah, it's like having Makoto like tutoring Koichi about the history of heroes and even talking about and you know, even developing the world of My Hero just a little bit further is very interesting, and I honestly really appreciate that. So yeah, Makoto reveals that when quirks started to appear, vigilantism started to be widespread throughout the world. However, it was getting to a point where it was becoming rampant, and then in the Americas, they actually set up the first hero program and distributed the first licenses to the first heroes of this new age. And speaking of America, this also brings us to the introduction of a brand new hero, that being Captain Celebrity. I'm not joking. The best way to describe Captain Celebrity is like an offshoot of All Might, although in terms of his ranking and popularity and also overall strength, it's like comparing apples to oranges. Like, yeah, they're both fruit, but one is an apple, the other is an orange, and the apple happens to be the #1 hero of all time. Yeah. So yeah, Captain Celebrity is kind of swooning a little bit. So yeah, Captain Celebrity would end up hiring the likes of Makoto to help out with this sabbatical here in Japan. Because, to put it lightly, he ran into trouble in the Americas for scandals, to say the least. Anyways, shenanigans ensues in this arc quite a bit. We even see more characters that are tied into My Hero Academia.
And talking about returning characters, it's here where we see Ida's brother, Ignesium, in full. And what we see in Vigilantes is basically what Ida described in My Hero word for word. Ignesium hires over dozens upon dozens of sidekicks to his hero agency and uses them all in full effect when on hero duty. And we see that in full display throughout Vigilantes. He even taps Koichi's shoulder, hoping he'd join him one day at his agency. It's kind of awesome that Vigilantes will take some of these characters from My Hero and further develop some throughout this story.
Before we tie it up to the next arc, the versus Queen Bee arc. Now, we should probably go back to the whole Trigger situation. So as I said, Trigger is the progenitor to the Nomu. It is there to really test out what kind of quirks can be exploited pretty much. And it all leads back to a character by the name of Queen Hashishuka. I'm probably going to need to get Google Translate to say some of these names.
It should be noted that Queen Hashishuka is not the character's real name. Rather, it's an alias provided by the one that's manufacturing the trigger drug. The real name of this character is actually Tamayo Oguro.
Anyways, I'm just going to skip to the main event of this arc, that being this event that one of the stores is throwing. Basically, this part of Japan is subjected to individuals with giant quirk attacks a lot. And 3 of those giants are straight up Godzilla, Gamera, and King Kong. I guess you could count on My Hero Academia to bring the 3 together. Okay, so wait, this is something I really want to talk about. Alright, sit down, listen to this. Alright, later on in Vigilantes, we actually learn that people who are given a different type of trigger later on turns them into like monstrous forms of themselves, and they can't really revert back. Basically, their bodies have been hyper-engineered, which is something that we see with the Nomu in My Hero Academia. So yeah, now these individuals who are now sane are stuck with these bodies and need to find reform. So some of them go to this cafe and kind of gives them a stepping stone to a better path. Now, in Vigilantes, there is a straight up reference to Godzilla. I mean, hell, one of the characters even said it's straight up Godzilla. Now, there's a hero in one of the My Hero Academia movies called Godzilla. And also, they're able to get away with this because the anime of My Hero Academia is being co-produced with Toho Animations. You know, the guys who own Godzilla. So here's my headcanon theory going forward. And also, I haven't seen the Vigilantes anime, so I can't really confirm this until I see it. But basically, I think that the Godzilla villain that we see in Vigilantes gets defeated, but gets reformed through the cafe, and then finding a new purpose in life, proceeds forward to become a hero, hence Godzilla that we see in the My Hero Academia movie. Because again, Vigilantes takes place right before the main events of My Hero Academia, right before the first chapter. So yeah, anyways, back to the main story. So the store is setting up an event to celebrate its grand reopening. Also, I find it so funny that the store is like, okay, we're gonna throw a concert. What should our entertainment sing? I know, our store jingle. So anyway, the main event in this arc has to be the confrontation between Knuckle Duster and Queen. Queen? Kan? Whoa? Because it's revealed that the schoolgirl who's distributing Trigger is actually the lost daughter of Knuckle Duster, and he is determined to get his daughter back home because her mom, his wife, is not doing so hot. And yeah, through a very shocking means of apprehending her, manages to subdue his daughter. However, this kind of also brings us to the bees. So one of the ways that Trigger is being distributed is not only through concealed drugs, but also through these bees from a queen bee quirk, which I'm starting to think is not so much a quirk, rather than a bioengineered menace, which we'll talk more about in a bit. So when Knuckle Duster zaps his daughter, he proceeds to lift up her eye patch and then bore a tool into her eye socket and just pull out this massive queen bee. Is oh yeah. So by the time I'm recording this, Alien Earth is happening, and I can't help but think about the eye octopus, really. So yeah, Knuckle Duster manages to capture his daughter. Aizawa actually stops another person with a triggered quirk to go crazy at this event that Popstep is actually attending. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about the Osaka incident since everything that really happens there all can be confined to a singular point, where Koichi and Popstep actually get caught up in a sting to find out who exactly is providing the trigger drugs. They managed to find 2 people who are distributing it, but they still have no idea who's providing the drugs themselves, who's actually manufacturing this, and hiring these individuals, or in the case of Knuckle Duster's daughter, putting a queen bee in her eye. And in typical Vigilantes fashion, everything kind of goes wrong, but then ultimately gets resolved. And hey, look, it's back up. Hey. Anyways, the arc ends when we find out a potential suspect in the creation of Trigger, this mysterious shadow figure. We'll learn about him soon, because this brings us to one of the more pivotal arcs, that being the Sky Egg arc. So everyone except for Knuckle Duster, he's been MIA ever since he managed to get his daughter back. But yeah, the Sky Egg arc takes place in a giant dome where the people of Japan are kind of celebrating Captain Celebrity's departure from Japan. Now, okay, so I should probably talk about it. So Captain Celebrity, as I said, is a bit of a scoundrel. But throughout the few arcs between his introduction to now, he slowly starts to develop more of a character. And he starts to resent some of the things that he did. Now, he hasn't done anything too heinous. He mainly, basically, he's a playboy, to say the least. And yeah, he cheats on his wife. Very bad. But then he kind of resents all the things that he's done, and he comes to a realization of what's really important. And it's because of the people that he's encountered in this small section of Tokyo that he starts to really change. And honestly, at first, he was that kind of annoying character. It's okay, I'm not going to care about this guy. But then, as we get closer and closer to the Sky Egg arc, he really started to grow on me. And I was really starting to like him as a character, simply because he found what was important. And the people of Japan even supported him so much because he's changing up his character. There was this one moment where he saved 3 young schoolgirls from a Nomu that was attacking their taxi, and it's revealed that his quirk allows him to envelop himself in a force field. However, when he made the rescue, he had no time, so he enveloped the girls in this force field while trying to get away from this exploding Nomu that detonated the car. And then he lands on the ground, and the paparazzi are crowding him, and he's like, "No, don't look at me!" But then Makoto simply says, "I think you've never looked any better," because, yeah, sure, he's a little beat up, but the only thing he looked like in that moment was a hero. Which brings us to the Sky Egg arc, which is basically this going away party for Captain Celebrity, because yeah, he was in sabbatical in Japan, but now it's time for him to return. However, the mysterious shadowy figure that we saw in the previous arc reappears again, and he manages to manufacture a small army of Nomu that specialize in self-destruction. They just blow up. And there's this just moment where the structure of Tokyo Tower is compromised, and the egg starts to fall. And Captain Celebrity, being the only superpowered human in the area, while All Might is elsewhere, tries to keep the Sky Egg aloft. And also, it's there's EMPs. The people inside the egg aren't able to communicate outside. They're pretty much in the dark. And another terrible thing is that there are other heroes in the Sky Egg, but they can't seem to get out of the Sky Egg. I can't help but feel hyped every time I think back to this arc, because the stakes are high, and by this time we've established the characters, and we really kind of come to care about them, and we really hope to see them come out of it alive. And me, in my pessimism, believed that Captain Celebrity was about to die, which he almost did. But while Captain Celebrity might be the star of this arc, he is certainly not the #1 hero in the entire world. While this situation at Sky Egg is happening, Makoto's brother is very hesitant about calling All Might for help, mainly because he wants to try and protect All Might's identity, but also protect himself and his sister. However, given the situation that's happening, he had no choice, and I'm sorry, it's like when he gets the call in, and then you just see Skinny Man All Might is like, I got you, bro, because I am here. It's like thinking back to it, it's great. I love it. I honestly really love it. A lot more than I think I should. Damn. But yeah, I think that's kind of the difference between All Might and My Hero Academia versus All Might here, because while All Might here is still inflicted with this ailment, that critical injury that he got from All for One, I'd still say this All Might is closer to his prime than the All Might we see in My Hero Academia. And then we have the School Days arc, which is nothing more but a prequel arc where we see Aizawa's past. So yeah, this arc is basically a younger Aizawa with a younger present Mike and their friend Oboro Shirakumo, who would end up becoming the vessel for Kurogiri. But yeah, saying that description, you probably know what's going to happen in this arc. We see Aizawa and present Mike and Oboro being friends with each other, going around classes, and sadly the arc ends with the passing of Oboro, which would lead us into the creation of Kurogiri that we see in My Hero Academia. Now this brings us to the end game of Vigilantes, the final performance arc, and the Naruhata lockdown arc. Now before we get to those two arcs, I'm going to talk about the arc that is slap dab in the middle. Since we talked about a prequel arc, let's talk about another prequel arc, that being the Underground Masquerade arc. Now in this arc, we see a much younger and actually having a quirk Knuckle Duster. Oh yeah, by the way, Knuckle Duster throughout the series does not have a quirk. He is just a strong old man. But as the series continues, we actually learn that Knuckle Duster used to be a hero by the name of O'Clock. Best way to describe O'Clock is basically the Flash, except doesn't have the time travel shenanigans, pretty much. So yeah, in the Underground Masquerade arc, we actually see Knuckle Duster infiltrating this illegal arena where people are fighting each other. This is actually where we meet one of Overhaul's henchmen, Rappa. Now, to put it simply, this whole underground fighting ring is actually a ploy made by All for One. This is basically his early attempts of figuring out certain strong quirks, hitting them with Trigger, and then taking their quirks away. Pretty much what any user of the Queen Bee was doing before. Knuckle Duster manages to infiltrate the fighting ring, however, is interrupted by a very young Mirako, who seems to not have changed at all between the events of this arc and the mainline My Hero Academia story. So it's Mirako, young Knuckle Duster, and Rappa who are trying to stop this event from happening to prevent All for One from gaining more quirks. And we also meet up with another character that we see in the mainline series, that being number 9, the superpowered Nomo that almost took out Endeavor pretty much. But yeah, the day is ultimately saved when All Might decides to step in, because of course. So now, with the 2 prequels out of the way, let's talk about the final 3 arcs of Vigilantes. So the villain behind the curtain is dubbed Number 6. He's actually a creation of One for All, one of their early attempts at creating a Nomu. And it's like, this is Number 6, that's Number 9. Yeah. Anyways, the characters in Vigilantes are getting to the point where they kind of want to move on. The events that Popstep used to attend are not gaining as much of an audience, therefore the organizers are now shutting it down. Koichi is about to graduate college, and he wants to get an actual job rather than being a vigilante. Makoto actually went to the United States with Captain Celebrity and is being his manager, more or less. And when this arc starts, it has been 3 years since the events of the first arc of Vigilantes, pretty much. Now, the only problem is, while Knuckle Duster is attending to his daughter and also tying up some loose ends around the world, and Koichi is getting ready to enter the job force, sadly, Popstep hasn't found a way to really move on, because the one thing that she had was being a pop star, and these events that the local store was throwing was more or less the only thing she had. So now she's kind of back to square one, and she's struggling to figure out how to move forward. And honestly, I can't help but feel for this character, just feeling so lost and just trying to find a way of moving forward, but just struggling to get that foothold, more or less. And this is where she's introduced to another character, the new manager of the store, who this is the first time we're hearing about a manager and this manager is like filling in the shoes of Makoto. Anyway, he encourages Popstep to experiment a bit. Let's try some new music. Have you been doing any new music? And it's revealed that Popstep is actually trying to find a way to move forward in life. And the arc is very nice, it's very cheery, and you can't help but have the warm fuzzies when you read it. However, so this twist I did not see coming. Alright, it has been like 3 years. I assumed that everything that happened in the Sky Egg arc has been resolved. Like, yeah, we have no more problems. I mean, sure, number 6 got away, but we're good. We're good. We are not good. We are not back, everybody. Because it's revealed that the manager that's been encouraging Popstep and trying to find something for her after the store will cancel the events, reveals himself to be number 6. Now, when it comes to like plot twists or the big reveal, I'm usually pretty in tune with the story enough to the point where I can see the trajectory of where things are going. Hell, there have been many moments, like, you could ask anyone that's been in a room with me while we're watching a movie or show. There have been moments where I can predict what a character is going to say word for word because it's just so obvious. So when this twist came out of nowhere, I was floored. And it works. It actually works. Like, going back to what I said about All for One being revealed to be the one that gave Shigaraki his decay quirk, it just felt very forced. It didn't really surprise me. It didn't really invoke any emotions. It just, yeah, cool. I guess that's a twist. But this twist actually is like made my head spin because it was so good. There was no like tease. There was no foreshadowing. It's just, yeah, there's this manager. He's not doing as good of a job as Makoto, but hey, like, what else could he be, right? Right? And yeah, it turns out he is like one of the worst people that could be with Popstep at that moment. And yeah, it was when his plan starts to unravel, like it's like Popstep is trying so hard to move forward, but at the same time she's also trying to like work up the courage to actually have a genuine conversation with Koichi. It's so like, I'm freaking out about it, but I just genuinely really enjoyed this. I really, really enjoyed this. And yeah, it's like when she tries to approach Koichi, and then, it's revealed like he has a tie on, and, Makoto's back in Japan after being a manager to Captain Celebrity in America, like, she's back now. And, like, like, her world just falls apart all over again, and I just felt for her. It's like, oh no. And then she like runs away, she's like crying in bed, and she calls fucking Sticks. It's like, I need you. It's like, no. But yeah, it's like, it's great. It's great. I fucking love this. It's kind of criminal how when the final performance arc ends, we see what number 6 did to Popstep. So like after Popstep has her like little meltdown, realizing that Makoto's back, and she's and her and Koichi are getting even closer than before. She calls number 6. Number 6 is like, hey, don't worry, I got you, and decides to meet up with Popstep in his lair, not a house, not a cafe, his lair. And yeah, when that when that chapter came up, and we see her being lured into this room that is filled with other bodies, like, my heart sank. It's like I knew that bad things were afoot, and bad things ended up happening. So Popstep ultimately gets kidnapped, and there's a missing persons report that is filed from her parents, and Koichi learns about this, and all of her friends, her circle within this small part of town, are now in high alert because their friend is missing. So they go around trying to find her, and sadly, they got exactly what they were asking for, because we see Popstep with number 6, and Popstep is infected with the same Queen Bee quirk that Knuckle Duster's daughter has. So, Popstep's minus an eye now. And yeah, it's like part of me just does not want to imagine what happened in that room. Like, yeah. So Koichi, along with, funnily enough, the 3 thugs from the first arc, which again, I'm not gonna talk about it, but this is kind of the one problem that I kind of had with Vigilantes, which is this kind of redemption for these 3 gang members, because yeah, it's like, for one, it's like, okay, cool, at the same time, don't you dare think I forgot what you were about to do to Popstep in Chapter 1. I got my eyes on you. So yeah, these 3 guys who are employed by Knuckle Duster, who have also been helping Knuckle Duster with his daughter's rehabilitation while he's overseas. They find Koichi after his first confrontation with this new Popstep, and the 3 of them manage to take Koichi to Knuckle Duster's secret gym, more or less, his secret base. And there, they start training Koichi to hone his quirk. Now, as I said in My Hero Academia, when you get a quirk, sometimes it can evolve, it can change, it could become more powerful than what it was initially. A good example of this is that Himeko Toga's quirk allows her to change it to anyone depending on how much blood she has, but then later on, she was able to evolve the quirk to the point where she not could only take up their appearance, but she could also copy their quirk. And something similar is happening here with Koichi. Before, he could only glide around using his sliding quirk, more or less, by having 3 points of contact on the surface. But now he got to the point where he can use only 2 hands. He could also reverse the polarity of his quirk, so he could stick onto things, so he could climb up walls or stay outside of a moving train. And he could even concentrate the force in his hands to shoot out a projectile. So in this warehouse, they managed to train Koichi until he is ready to face again Popstep. And now it's just a matter of waiting for Popstep and number 6 to resurface. And resurface they did. So when the final confrontation finally happens, we learn some things about number 6. So number 6 is brought up by All for One. And All for One asked number 6 to study a hero, and he chose O'Clock. Now it's very clear that number 6 holds O'Clock with a certain level of admiration, to the point where he wants to become the next O'Clock. So when this battle between Koichi and Popstep commences, uses this conflict as an opportunity to make his own debut, to become the successor of O'Clock. And basically, this is just all a game to him. What he really wants to do is play everything right. He wants Koichi to kill Popstep, and if he won't kill Popstep, number 6 will do it himself, and then frame Koichi for the murder, basically living out the ultimate superhero fantasy, where Koichi is going to be his arch rival because he killed Popstep. Killed Popstep. But of course, things don't go according to plan, and the end result is that number 6 gets heavily disfigured by the likes of Endeavor, by accident, mind you. And this is all while Koichi is trying to get Popstep the right medical attention. And luckily, they managed to get her to a hospital just in time to both A, revive her, and B, extract the queen bee from her eye socket. This then brings us to the final arc of the series, where Koichi and number 6 have their final confrontation. But yeah, basically, the threat on number 6 is still ever looming, and Koichi knows that number 6 aims to finish the job that he started, to kill Popstep. But this time, instead of her playing a role in his origin story, this is just him cleaning up evidence. So yeah, Koichi, along with the 3 thugs, camp out near the hospital that Popstep is staying, who sadly, through the procedures that she went through, everything that happened in the previous fight, is in a coma. Basically, they're all waiting patiently for number 6 to make a move. However, the winds turn against him as the local police departments and superhero agencies around the local area try to arrest Koichi for vigilantism. Because given everything that has happened, they just want to bring him in for questioning because Koichi has flown too close to this case. However, Koichi, along with the three thugs that are helping him, know that if he were to be taken in, then that would leave Popstep wide open for number 6 to take advantage and, finish the job. And what ends up happening is Koichi needs to evade a number of heroes actively going after him, one of them being Aizawa himself. But then, as this chase continues, they have to double back to the hospital because number 6 has made his move, and he's not alone. He has his own army of, I want to say, proto-nomus, to say the least. And they actually almost manage to get away with it. However, Koichi manages to intervene and fight number 6. And the two of them go at it. And it's here that number 6 kind of realizes that Koichi is his arch-rival. And this is kind of where I kind of question where number 6 is coming from, because it seems that, with his superhero debut and how he's perceiving Koichi, or more or less the dialogue that he uses to perceive Koichi, it seems like he generally wants to be a hero. The problem is, he has a very messed up mind going about it. I think a really good example of this is how the hero killer kind of thinks he's a hero because he's killing the false heroes, to say the least. But at the end of the day, he's still a murderer, more or less. And I think the same thing is happening to number 6, but to a more sadistic degree. Like, he knows what he's doing. He knows that he's killing innocent people and heroes, so on and so forth. So yeah, I think he just has a very, very messed up mind in terms of what he perceives to be the world. So yeah, Koichi, being the only speedster in the area, has to go and alert All Might about the situation that's happening with number 6. But yeah, what ends up happening is that Koichi will make a tactical retreat to try and get All Might to fighting number 6 to prevent him from causing any further damage, to retreating again, and it kind of goes a little back and forth. And in the middle, we have interventions from 3 gang members, and more importantly, Knuckle Duster himself, who was planning to take number 6 with him. However, one of the gang members sabotages the bomb that Knuckle Duster was hoping to use to stop number 6. But yeah, it's not out of malice. Like, the only reason why the gang member did that is because, again, Knuckle Duster hired the gang member to help with his daughter recuperate, and I'm guessing through that he decided to foil Knuckle Duster's plan, killing this thing with a bomb, with him just above it. And, simply saying, "Don't die on me, you got people waiting for you." And it's like, yeah, you do. Anyways, Koichi and number 6 actually have a battle that is quite similar to the ending of My Hero Academia, where we see vestiges of them being younger and, they're playing on a playground. But, yeah, this is also in conjunction to when number 6, being a Nomu himself. Did I mention that, or were the pictures enough? Anyways, him being a Nomu slowly starts to evolve, and he gets to the point where he turns into this giant thing of plasma. Just this giant fire monster that's wrecking the town. And it gets so intense. And, it kind of goes back to what I said about the initial My Hero Academia at the final arc, where it really felt like the characters should not be walking away from the things that they're getting away with. Same thing here. Like, the amount of regeneration and degeneration that number 6 has been going through, he should have died like 3 separate times in this fight, and yet he just keeps going. His fight for Koichi is just that strong. So yeah, the arc ends. Koichi is brought into hospital. Popstep wakes up from her coma, and everyone pretty much survives. In the final chapter, which is chapter 126, we actually get a bit of a time jump. We see Popstep attending classes, and it's moving forward. She even manages to reconnect with the other singers that she performed with. Meanwhile, with Koichi, he's in New York, being Captain Celebrity's sidekick as an officially licensed superhero. And of course, old Knuckle Duster is still kicking, and he's chewing ass and kicking bubblegum. Wait a minute. And yeah, that is My Hero Vigilantes. And as you could hear from some of the things that happen, I enjoy Vigilantes way more than I do My Hero Academia. And I know some people are going to have a problem with that, but yeah, for me, it just hits all the right notes. And it also hits pretty close to home, close to the heart, with the way that some characters are developed or some of the things that they're facing against. I really, really like Vigilantes. And Miles, if you're watching this, damn you for making me read this before My Hero Academia. But either way, I think if I read this even after My Hero Academia, maybe my thoughts are probably going to stay the same. It's like, yeah, if all I'll say is if you like My Hero Academia, then I highly suggest you check out Vigilantes, either the anime or the manga. Now, this is where I would probably end things, but there is one more thing I want to talk about in regards to My Hero Academia, and that being the initial concept for it. Yep, we are going to be talking about the one-shot. So one-shots for manga are kind of like pilot episodes, to say the least. They're more or less a pitch to see if an idea will work or people will approve of it. Now, sometimes there are really stark differences between the pitch and the first chapter of the serialized manga, but other times they're just one of the same. Now, in the case of My Hero Academia's initial one-shot, it couldn't have been more different. For one, this is Midoriya. Well, not exactly Izuku Midoriya, but Midoriya Jack. But yeah, like going through the initial one-shot, you could clearly see where some of the ideas for My Hero Academia would come from. Midoriya in the one-shot itself, I can't help but see three characters in this one-shot version. For one, the name Midoriya, along with the character's design, is very close to the main character that we see in My Hero Academia later on. However, the fact that he proceeds to be a vigilante and work illegally by being a hero without a license is very indicative of Koichi in Vigilantes. And finally, we have the fact that he's inflicted with an ailment. This version of Midoriya is anemic, and he shows it by spitting up blood, very similar to All Might in both Vigilantes and My Hero Academia. Now, there isn't really much to say about this one-shot. For one, I kind of consider this taking place in the early years, like maybe a couple of years after the first hero agency is founded and hero licenses are being distributed and the hero program is being established in the US. We even have a returning character from the mainline My Hero Academia series, that being Snipe. But yeah, beyond that, to put it like really quickly, because it's just one chapter, Midoriya Jack works for a superhero supply agency, superhero supply store, more or less. And they provide products for the superheroes to fight against the, what are they called again? An aberrant, who very much resemble the out-of-control quirks that we see that the villains use in both My Hero Academia and Vigilantes. So yeah, in this one-shot, Midoriya Jack is a salesman for this supply firm. So yeah, basically almost half of this one-shot is just him trying to sell products to superheroes, while the other half is him playing Vigilante. Anyways, it all ends when he realizes that Snipe, who he starts resenting a bit, in this one-shot, is revealed to actually be a hero that helped Midoriya back in the day. But yeah, outside of that, there's not really a lot else to really mention. The only other character worth mentioning is Midoriya's boss, who runs the company. And looking at her, I can't really see her being a combination of characters or one character. The only thing that's like drawing in my mind is Midnight, but that's because they're both wearing glasses and they have black hair. So yeah, nothing too much there. Also, the style of this one-shot is way different from what the mainline series is going to be. But yeah, this one-shot was actually submitted back in 2008, and as stated before, My Hero Academia, the actual manga itself, wouldn't start publication or serialization until 2014. But yeah, it's like I found the image of Midoriya again, and I can't help but think that he's like, you know, went down the vendor. It's like, it looks like he took some crack, I don't know. So yeah, it's very interesting to see where this series kind of more or less came from, because this series is vastly different from what we ended up getting. But yeah, I think that's everything. Happy endings all around, more or less. So yeah, that is my my little 3-week journey into My Hero Academia. So right off the bat, I enjoyed the series. I will say My Hero Academia itself, I think there's just a lot missing. I feel like in terms of how people were talking it up, I was expecting way more from that series. So by the time I got to the end of it, it's like, so we only got one whole year of events and not too many characters to really latch onto, and a teaspoon worth of lore. And then we have Vigilantes, which kind of goes in the opposite direction, where it does develop its characters to the point where I, as a reader, actually started to care about them and really wanted to see them move forward into the world. It gives us really deep cuts into the lore itself, like not just like how they don't just talk about things that are happening currently. Like Vigilantes does do deep cuts into the past of the world of My Hero. And the story in the end, I just feel way more fulfilled. But yeah, that isn't to say I hate My Hero Academia. It's just if I were to give them the choice, I would take Vigilantes over the mainline My Hero Academia series. But I definitely think both series have things to give and take when it comes to overall enjoyment. So yeah, I like My Hero Academia, pretty much. But yeah, that is my first journey through. Now, this is a video series that I've been hoping to do for quite a while. And you know, I have like a whole folder backed up with different video ideas. And this idea itself, this little series that I hope to continue, ultimately cannibalized a good number of those videos simply because they have a similar premise, which is just me visiting or revisiting titles that I wanted to check out. And honestly, I'm really looking forward to what I'll check out next. I already have a plan of what the next video in this series is going to be, but you know, I'm just going to keep that close to the chest and a little hush hush and lock lock. But yeah, I'm not just going to keep this to my own personal list. I might even go as far as to pick out suggestions that you guys might put out. So yeah, if there's something that you guys think I should check out, feel free to leave it in the comments. But yeah, that is the video. Hopefully next time, I'm not just going to be laying in bed like I am now. Hopefully next time it's going to be a little bit more organized, a little bit more informative, because here I just feel like I'm just skating through because it's like September right now, and I'm hoping to get this out before the final season of My Hero Academia comes out, which is October 4th. So demon time, baby. That is the video. This is my first journey through, and I hope to see you all in a later video. Till next time, everybody. Ugh.